Welcome to another edition of the Roar the Lions UK podcast, episode 115, Because You're Mine, I Walk the Line. My name is Matthew Turner alongside Anthony Fitzpatrick, Ryan McCluskey, Tom Wilkinson. How you doing, boys?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, not doing bad. Not doing bad.
And Ryan will be with us in just a moment, but he's just coming online, so we'll say hello to him in a little minute. Just want to thank everyone for joining us once again for this one. Really exciting time of year, obviously, at the moment with the NFL Combine and the run-up to the NFL Draft in general. We are just 8 short weeks away, just less than 8 short weeks away from the NFL Draft. Just want to start off with a bit of housekeeping. Don't forget to join our Discord channel. You can DM us for a link to that, but it's ever growing. Lots of really good chat, especially during the Combine, but in the run-up to the draft, I'm sure you'll get everything you need in Lions content there, so please do hit us up. College Football Podcast has been running all the way through, and I know that you took last week off, I think, but what have you been talking about previously?
We were just doing combine bits, looking up towards pro days. I think it was the Senior Bowl by then as well. We took last week off. We should possibly be back this week. I still need to do a schedule with Ryan, really, but it's going to be all draft-related stuff going forward now, probably more in-depth. Well, these are in-depth reviews today. It'll probably be the same, but over a greater detail of players. We'll see, but we'll have it back up and running soon. Just needed a week's break from it because it takes so damn long to produce.
Yeah, like a full day's worth of stuff on your day off from work. I don't envy you doing that, man. Don't forget to like and sub to the podcast if at all you can. I know that it can be done now on Spotify. If you can do it on Apple as well, that'd be fantastic. Really helps us out. Don't forget as well about our partners at Lions Nation Unite. That's where you can find the absolute best in Lions hobby content creators. Fantastic place, Herman Moore's pet project, and it's going to be the best. You know, there's no paid media there. No one kind of picking up a paycheck to cover the team who don't really know what they're talking about. Not naming any names. So yeah, you've got to download that at lionsnationunite.com. Otherwise, don't forget that we've just been made a Twitch affiliate. So if you've got any Amazon Prime free subs that you can throw our way, we'd be ever so grateful. That'd be fantastic. Right, got a packed show for you today, so we've got to jump into it. We're going to start off with the news through the last 7 days. There's actually been quite a lot going on in Lions news this week. We're then going to have a look at the NFL Combine, just do a bit of a broad brush of what's happened through the 4 days of on-field drills. And then we're going to go for a deep dive into the defensive line, if you couldn't tell from the title of the episode. So we're going to be having a look at your nose tackles, your DTs, and your 4-3 defensive ends. But we're going to start off with a bit of news, and it's all started this week with the announcement our inside linebackers coach role has been filled by our outside linebackers coach. So Coach Kelvin Shepherd, or better known as Coach Shep, as we found out during the Senior Bowl, he has been transitioned into inside linebackers coach. Boys, I don't know whether this is really a promotion, but it is the position that Kelvin knows best, having played it through his career and a year with the Lions at inside linebackers. What do you make of this move? I think it was potentially expected.
Yeah, I don't think I've got really strong views on it, other than the fact I think it's interesting the Lions have decided to move him, because everything you hear about how Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn talk about him is they clearly like him as a coach. I thought he showed up really well at the Senior Bowl in terms of he got a little bit more airtime there. So I think it's interesting that they think it's worth the move, because everything from last year suggested it was working, having him work with the outside guys and the edge guys. So whilst I don't have a strong view, I think it's good that they feel good enough about moving him back to the position which he used to play. And obviously, inside linebacker is going to be a focus for this team moving forward, potentially with some new bases coming over the next couple of months.
Well, I mean, you know, the inside linebacking goal, let's face it, let's be very nice. It's been incredibly poor these last few years. We need an inside linebacker, something chronic, really, to be honest. And I think the fact that they trust him as a coach and they like what he does, they've really put in a guy there who they think can go in and fix the position. So I think it's a big challenge for him. But again, you know, they've shown the faith in him. and they're giving him total responsibility here. If he can go in and fix that inside linebacking core in a year or so, then he's going to come out of this looking incredibly good, and he'll soon be making his way up the coordinator list. So, I think it's a good hire as far as it goes, moving him in. Hopefully he can get it sorted, because it really is a bugbear on our defense.
You're right, Ryan. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm all sorted now.
Good.
It doesn't feel like a promotion. It doesn't look like it, but I feel like it is, because I feel like it's a harder job, as you mentioned, inside linebacker. It sounds like we're clearing shop. Like I said, there's going to be a lot there to work with if we lose. Like, I know there's likes of Pittman, Sean Dane Hamilton, and Zaloni. We don't know if he'll be back. We don't know if we'll retain JRM. It's going to be a potential clear house, full body of people to work with and bring him in. So to move him back there, I think it's certainly a challenge on his hands. As you mentioned, it's been a position that we have been exploited in the past. We've struggled there, so it's going to take a lot of work. So I think they trust him. They've given him a lot of responsibility to try to turn around one of the weaknesses on defense there. And I'm hoping he's going to have some say in potentially who he wants to bring in, who wants to work in that role. So it's going to be exciting, whatever we do there, because there's certainly going to be a few holes there with positions to fill.
I think that it is actually a promotion. I genuinely think it is, kind of following on from what Ryan has said, but maybe going even a step further. I think that if you have a look at how the outside linebackers did last year, if you have a look at how Romeo started, which was on pace for top 3 in the NFL in pressures before he got injured in the 4th game of the season. If you have a look at how Charles Harris did with, almost no pedigree whatsoever. And if you have a look at how the rotational guys did in that room too, which was, higher than they were expected to do. I'm not going to say that they were elite, because that would be a lie, but they performed above expectation. I think they've looked at him and they've gone, we know the inside linebackers, and that it's going to be a room of young guys who need moulding. If you had a look at the Senior Bowl, loads of people chose Shep as the guy who could just step onto the field and play when they were asked that question. And I think that players are going to relate to him really, really well. So they're looking at him as someone who's a really good mentor, who's had success in one role and hopes it translates to the one that is perhaps the biggest coaching position of need, if I can put it that way, is going to be the rawest room, the one that can be moulded most. It will be moulded one way or the other, for better or worse. And I think they trust him to do a really good job.
Yeah, and I think just to tie that off as well, I hadn't really thought about it from a promotion standpoint, but in very simple terms, they've gone from 3 coaches for the front 7 to 2. And with Todd Wash as the other one, obviously an experienced guy in himself, you can't see that as anything else other than a promotion, I guess, because they've almost got rid of a coach and given you a greater level of responsibility. It's also going to test him in a way, because guys like Julian Aquara might sit not necessarily in the inside linebacker room, but could be playing as a strong side linebacker in some of these new 4-man fronts, which I'm sure we'll come to talk about in a little. So, yeah, it's just going to be, I think it's interesting. But, yeah, I assume more of a promotion than it's certainly not a demotion. So.
Another one of the coaching moves is that offensive quality control coach Tanner Engstrand was promoted to tight ends coach. This makes official the de facto interim move, which was made during the season. So the offensive coordinator was obviously effectively not dismissed, but he had his role reduced. You had Ben Johnson become pass game coordinator and relinquish much of his tight ends coach duties during that period. And Tanner took over as de facto tight ends coach, or he has now assumed that role. For me, this is one that I also expected. I don't really know what to think, though. I mean, down the stretch, I like what happened with Brock Wright. He didn't set the world on fire, but he did have one really nice touchdown, and his play improved during the season. But from a very low base, I mean, not a lot was expected of him as a UDFA, and he was kind of thrust into this tight end 2 role. But Hawkinson, apart from the first couple of games, underwhelmed for me pretty much all season. And I'm not sold on this one. It's one that kind of very much putting in that to be proven, to be seen. What about you guys?
I don't really know what to expect from this hire. I don't know enough about Tanner's background as a playing or anything like that to say that he knows the role well. I agree. It's also a position where there's going to be a lot of work to do. like I say, Brock Wright showed flashes. TJ can be very hot and cold, so we need someone to help work on blocking. Like I say, we know where he needs his strengths to be in the off season, so he's obviously someone that knows well, like I say, strength and conditioning. So it's certainly going to be interesting to see how he develops and gels with these guys. I imagine he must know them quite well, must have built a rapport or a relationship. So for Dan to trust someone on the inside and not go for an external hire for a position like this, he clearly thinks very highly of him, because there would have been people in there to bring from previous teams or bring in like big seats, someone like Josh Hill, which would have been very easy to do, but he's decided that he wants to try go internal where he can, give opportunities to those who that he deems worthy. So this could only go up, like I say, so best of luck to him. So I'm going to certainly keep an eye out, because hopefully we're going to be making some additions at tight end and give him some toys to work with as well.
Yeah, my Tanner Engstrand knowledge is officially zero. However, I think you summed up really nicely there. The key for me is, as we look to build momentum with the team and with what we're doing in Detroit, I think keeping guys around is a positive thing. It shows that you're not feeling like you need to replace guys necessarily or bring in lots of new blood. Now, the flip side of that is if you do end up losing coaches down the line, then obviously you want people who are here to replace them. But I think the more you can do to keep the same group together, the better, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm with Tom. My knowledge here on some of these lower level coaches is not very high at all. So I don't think there's anything meaningful I can add to this, except that Tanner gives me a whole big use of social media if he ever does anything. It's such a great name. So many things you can do with it, but outside of that, I can't add anything, I'm afraid.
Well, we'll go on then to the next bit of information, which Tom actually has already alluded to. So the outside linebacking coach role will be filled by current defensive line coach Todd Wash and director of football research David Corral. Corral was an assistant linebackers coach at Miami while Dan Campbell was in Miami, and he also performed the same role in Detroit under the Patricia regime. So it's a role that he is used to, although I believe that he's been in his director of football research role for a number of years now. I think that was earlier on in the Patricia era. Wash obviously is a former defensive coordinator at the Jacksonville Jags, so he has got pedigree much higher than this. To have him fulfilling your outside linebacker role in tandem with someone else who's already done the job and someone that Dan Campbell knows well, I think can only be a good thing. Like Tom said, I think it's a promotion for Shep, but I also think it's something that they feel like they can fulfill quite easily with the existing people they have. Yeah,
if you don't need to go outsource that position, or if you don't need to throw money at it, and if you've got someone in the building that's able to take on more responsibility, like the experience of Todd Wash, who's able to have fingers in many pies and speak to different groups of players on the sideline at once and get the message across clearly, then do it. Like I say, if it comes from experience, that's fine. As you mentioned, we're going to this new forefront. So if he wants all those players in one group, I feel like a decision was made early. We're going to move the linebackers coach. We're going to change the defensive front. We're going to have this special, a researcher take on position as well. So all these decisions weren't made at different times. They must have been made as a unit together. So it sounds like there's a clear plan and there's a clear direction we want to go in. So you can't really fault it.
I mean, continuity is a key here. I mean, pretty much all the staff were new last year. So it is good to be able to finally keep some in-house and keep them growing a rapport together. So I do like that they've tried to go in-house with it all, because we got lucky with how many of the hires we landed on last year. So many of them come in from outside. It doesn't often work, but you get so many guys who just come in and seem to seamlessly slot in. So now it's time to keep them here, keep them progressing, and hopefully these moves do work out.
Ashley has been in the Twitch chat saying Tanner E, by the looks of it, is a mini Ben Johnson, former college quarterback, coaching a few different places in a few different roles. Thank you for that, my man. Just want to say hello to everyone who is watching live with us at the moment. So, as I say, you've got Ash in there on the Twitch chat and a couple of other usernames that I do not recognise. Hello to you all. And then in the YouTube chat, we've got Lions Rumble, Dan McGuinness, Luke G, couple of others. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Got any questions or any comments, please do leave them and we will get to them. Let's move it on to that idea of the 4-man front. So MCDC did go in front of the mic at the Combine and reveal that more 4-man fronts are coming. He thought that it would better suit the personnel we have here, which is something that they've preached all along, that we're going to do what suits the personnel and not try and shoehorn the personnel into the better position grouping. I do, first of all, just from a kind of standpoint of, well, what's changed from last year, we were meant to try and fit what we had as best we could. And as far as I'm aware, we've not signed anyone between now and the end of this, and from the end of the season to now. So unless they have already on their chalkboard gone, well, we're taking this person at 2 and this person at 32 and whatever, that how do they know? Unless there's an admission that they got last year wrong. And in fact, I think that's potentially what it is. Cohen, we've had a look back at the previous year, and maybe we should have been in more 4-3 than we were. What do you guys make of that, first of all, before we talk about the mechanics of what's going to change?
So I don't think it's going to be a massive change. And the reason being, I don't have any data to support this, but I remember in the back half of the season being almost surprised how often we'd have a 4-man front in some way, shape or form. We'd have 2 defensive tackles. It was rare, really, that we'd actually put 3 on the field at the same time, unless we were just closing an end. And quite often we'd have our 2 ends standing up, whereas traditionally in a 4-3, you'd have them with their hands on the ground. But I just don't think it's going to look that different. I think had Levi, for example, set the world on fire last year and we were like, we need to get him 80% of snaps, then maybe you try and get more interior defensive guys on. But with Brockers probably only here for another year or 2, with Nick Williams potentially not coming back, it's not like we have lots of depth in the interior side anyway. So it's not really a strength of the team. And in which case, why wouldn't you continue what was working towards the back end of the year? So I think it will stay relatively hybrid and we'll still have some 3-man fronts as well. But the traditional 3-man front, as we talked about before last season, is 2-gapping. And that's not what we were doing anyway. So it's not as kind of Madden as we've gone from a 3-4 to a 4-3 in that sense. And actually, I don't think it's going to change a huge amount.
Bingo, Tom called it there. You know, I said it the same. It didn't feel like we were in 3 much at all last year. You can tell by Aleem's snap count how low it was. You know, having our thoroughbred nose tackle in there, he barely played for a lot of the first 2 games of the year because we just kept going to a 4-man front there, because I was forever frustrated that Brockers and Williams were in there getting manhandled by anybody and everybody, even guys off the street. They're bloody useless. And I think the thing that maybe swayed it last year, you won't play a 3-man front. We got in Aleem and Levi to do that. But the trouble is, when 2/3 of your 3-man front are rookies, it's very difficult to integrate that to a high level straight away. You can't expect these guys to come in and form 2/3 of an interior defensive line and be successful. Plus, Levi was injured for part of it. So I think they had to go to more of a 4-man front just because of the men we lost. I mean, don't forget, there's no Romeo in there either. You know, we lost a lot of our weapons. So I think it just sort of suited the personnel we had at the time. But I mean, for now, going into next year, I would still expect us to see us play 3 as well. As the guys get more experienced and we get the right guys in here, I would expect us to go back. But I think for now, it does make sense. You know, Levi plays better when he's at a 3-tech. Aleem can play at a 2-tech or 1-tech. He ain't just a nose tackle. So it works for now. But it wouldn't surprise me if they went back again when we got the requisite personnel in, but I don't think we're going to see much difference at all. The only difference we're going to see, and a welcome one, is there's going to be no Nick Williams in the interior of that defensive line. We're going to have someone competent there. Hopefully Aleem and hopefully Levi, now he's healthy.
So you're a Nick Williams fan. We've established that. Ryan, what do you think?
No, I've got to agree with everything it said. I think this will benefit the younger guys. Like you say, we've still got Pinacina. Like you say, we've still got the likes of Lee McNeil, Levi. We need to see them on the field next year. They've got to slowly start to tick the snap count up in their favour. Brockers will slowly be phased out over the next year if they don't do any cap cutting and get rid of him this year. So it works in the benefit of increasing the young stud talent we have on the interior, which is what I want to see next year. The 3, like I say, it may change how we use linebackers in the future. That may be a bigger change that we have at the 4-3. That could be with the personnel changes as well. So could see different things going there, more stunts, maybe more blitzing, things like that. So we'll see what personnel we get there. But up front, I don't think it'll make a huge difference, as everyone said. I think it's more natural. Like I say, we do like to flex, get guys hands in the dirt, but we'll also stand them up and put them on the edge if needs be. So it just gives more flexibility. And for the personnel we have right now, before we make any additions, it makes sense. Like I say, and maybe it's an indicator to who we could be bringing in and who we could possibly draft in as well that could fit on that 4-man front.
Yeah, so just to talk about the mechanics of what's happening here, especially for any of the UK guys who are just discovering the game, the numbers refer to the lines at the front of your defense. So the first number is your defensive line, the second number is your linebackers, and they form your front 7 traditionally. So 4-3, 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 3-4, 3 defensive linemen, and 4 linebackers. What this means in practice is that you drop your nose tackle out of 3-4, they become a linebacker. You push in your 3 and 5 tech or 3 and 4i in a little bit, and then you actually get to edge players playing in a little bit more, as opposed to your outside linebackers who would be a bit more kind of wide 9 or even standing off a bit further there. So potentially it's a little bit stronger against the run because you've got 4 guys directly on the line of scrimmage, quite close to each other. On the other hand, it means you are relying a lot more on your linebackers to read and react to what's happening because there's more of them to plug the gaps that are happening. As Tom said, though, less 2-gapping with a 4-man front. So 2-gapping means that you are trying to protect the gap on the left and right-hand side of each man. 1-gapping refers to the fact that you are just trying to get through one gap, penetrate, and get to the quarterback as a pass rusher, or just fill that one gap in run defense. So that's about the long and short of what's going on there. But how do you guys, if we do see a small but significant change in what's going on in seeing 4-man fronts, how do you think that's going to affect the Lions? Do you think it affects how we draft people at all? If the changes may be slightly more than you think it's going to be, does it affect our roster construction at all?
I'll tell you one thing, it's not changing because we're drafting a certain player. I can tell you that now. I've seen that all over the place. And to change your scheme for a player who you might not be able to draft is stupid. Quite blatantly stupid. Yes, it's going to affect the targets that you get in the draft. You are looking for a different type of player maybe now, but I think their draft strategy, they like their hybrid guys. They like the guys who can do a little more than usual. So, outside of any guys who are sort of really rigid positionally, I think everyone's still in play. But I think this just gives them, as I say, more flexibility with the guys they've got at the moment. We don't have too many linebackers, so it's probably best to have that in a situation where we can build that room up a bit more. Say we don't really have 4 linebackers, 4 really good ones at the minute. So I don't think it changes much, to be fair. I think they know what their draft strategy is, and they like the players they got here. They will try and fill the holes with them, but there'll be a certain type of player, not a player.
I think.
Agree.
Go on.
Go on. I think this 4-3, I think this tells us that we need a big linebacker. Like I say, when you've got less bodies to fill those holes, if we're going to play against the run, this does open up the doors for, like say, someone like a Nakobe Dean, someone a bit more physical. We like these speedy linebackers. We like the guys that are good agility side to side. But I think we need a run stuffer. I think that's what welcomes this defense now. I think that this front will look better with someone that's able to marshal those gaps in the middle and come up and meet a running back in the middle. So I agree. It doesn't pencil us into just any name, but now I think it will put a lot of emphasis on who we take at the linebacker spot, because as you say, with one less linebacker, that's more work and more to be shared, coming up and stopping the run in the middle. So there's going to be a bit more responsibility there, and it does change maybe the body type you look for.
Yeah, so I'll caveat it with, I'm firmly in the belief that the Lions aren't a good enough team now that really any position should be off the table during the draft. I think you should go with the best player around. Obviously, if we took an offensive tackle at 2, I'd ask questions, but it's not my job. But in general, I think we should be taking the best player available pretty much the whole way through. That being said, and not to undo a lot of the work that Oscar is going to talk about a bit later, I do think interior defensive line is probably less likely at the top now. The reason being, previously in the three-man front, we'd have two guys who were playing 3-tech, 4-eye, potentially 5-tech, etc. So someone like a Devontae Wyatt was still very much on the table. Do I think the Lions are going to go for that now? Probably not, because that feels a identical role to what you've got with Levi. It's probably not a great use of resources. I would still be tempted because I think he's a great player. However, I just don't think the Lions are going to, I don't think that's the direction they will go. So I think it's less likely that you end up seeing an interior defensive guy at 32, 34. I actually think on the linebacker side, it opens it up a little bit because yes, you might end up having a Sam linebacker sometimes. So one of the big guys, is it Darian Beavers is the guy they talk about who's 250, or Leo Chenal, I'm probably ruining his name, but he's another big guy who can run. So yes, it opens up that side, but also some of these small, speedy guys, Channing Tindall, those kind of types who might play weak side backer. You kind of got roles for all of these guys now. Now, I don't think we're going to go out and get 3 or 4 linebackers in the draft. I think that would be a really bad use of resources, but I think it does open us up to really take kind of all types of linebacker, as long as they can run.
So there's a question in the chat, and I want to add one to it as well. So from One Funky Lions fan, and thank you for joining us as well, and Charles Davis is in there too, Everything King. Thank you all for joining us. One Funky Lions fan said, why is it that no one has asked if the 4-man front comment is directly a result of them possibly expecting to have Trey Flowers and Romeo Okwara as their day one starters at defensive end? And I also want to throw in there, does this create a more natural role for Derek Barnes to take the mic role as the run stuffer that you guys have been saying all season much more suits his skill set rather than someone trying to be a coverage guy, which at the moment he isn't? What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, you see the news at the minute. The Lions are apparently a big player in the free agency market for wide receivers. It's going to cost money, and it's money that we don't have unless we cut Trey Flowers. So, you know, if you're going to, the only way you can make a big splash in free agency this year is if you cut Trey Flowers. We don't have the money other than that. So I think those two are maybe linked a little hand in hand with one another there. And plus, you know, Romeo might not be fit for next year. I believe it says he's not going to be fit for next year, at least the very start anyhow. So I don't know. I just don't feel like it's going to be there. I mean, they could, because I mean, we discussed in free agency last week, was it? I mean, we all turned around and said, well, hang on. Surprisingly, we don't want to spend any money. We'll roll it over to next year. And if you were going to do that, and that's the case, you could maybe see Flowers staying. If you're not bothered about the money and you're going to be able to keep it there, then just keep him here, pay him to play here, and then get rid of him next year when it's a hell of a lot cheaper. But I don't know. I just don't see a situation where he's here next year. You know, they're taking the hard line with these guys and their contracts. And, you know, if they want to spend big in free agency, they've simply got to cut him. So, no, I don't see him staying from that role. Barnes, I think, will get an extended role next year. You know, we don't have many linebackers, and as has been said, I don't think we're going to draft too many linebackers, at least starting caliber linebackers. So he's going to need to step up and take a position in there, providing he earns one. But I think that's the plan for them, him to have a good offseason, come in there and get one of those starting roles going forward, alongside probably another drafted guy, maybe someone out of free agency, who knows? We'll see.
I agree. For me, it's impossible to make a case for keeping Flowers. If you can save, what is it, $10.1 million as a post-June cut, you've got to get rid of him. He has not lived up to his contract any which way possible, and he won't. So he's got to go. So this for free, I don't feel like it's any recognition to him. I agree. Okwara, people need to rein in their expectations what to get from him next year, coming back from a torn ACL. Obviously, he will be one of those wide guys, like the wide. He is a designated pass rusher. He will be that guy, but he's going to start the season very slowly. So I don't feel like this positional move is for anyone that's currently on the roster or currently on it, currently off it. I mean, I don't think those two, one won't be here, one will start very slowly. So I wouldn't attribute that to either of them. But I do agree. I would be looking to ease him into the Mike linebacker position, because the position he played at Purdue Like I say, I want him to diagnose run plays, heat, seek, missile, and destroy. I want him to come down. I want him to fill the gaps, stuff the run, which he's really good at. Lateral side-to-side movement, his pursuit when anyone comes out of the box. If we can keep him out of coverage until those skills have improved, I would very much like to see Derek in that linebacker position and slowly learning to take the green dot, diagnose and call plays. I feel like that would be a natural progression for him in an expanded year 2 role.
Yeah, nothing much more to add. I think I'd be surprised if Flowers stays. I don't think they'll be doing it on the assumption that they've already zeroed in, expecting to take an edge at 2. And therefore, you never know if you're going to end up taking one at 32 or 34. So the plan is for the people there hoping to bring onto the roster in the next 3 weeks. But really, the guys that are already there. And whilst I wouldn't say our edge guys are a strength, I don't think it's a particularly light position 2. And I expect we'll bring in probably a vet on a relatively small deal, similar to Charles Harris last year, to compete and take snaps as well, just in case we go in other directions in the draft.
So do you think this changes anything for Charles Harris, then, just mentioning him? Because I think that he actually excelled as that outside linebacker. He obviously had the best season of his career. If he is moving inside slightly, maybe moving from sort of wide 9 to 7 tech or something like that, that hurts him a little bit, hand in the dirt a little bit more?
No, I think he's shown that he can play in the 4-man front, and I don't think that affects him there. I think maybe that's why they've done this, because if he does come back, that's where he's going to slot in best. I still think we should pay him. Guy's had a good year, and we don't know what his monetary demands are. We don't know whether he's asking the earth. If the value's there, then absolutely you bring him back, and this is the system that will fit him best.
Showed later in this. Oops, sorry. Go on, Tom.
I was just going to say, if he's coming back at a reasonable rate, I'm here for it. If he's looking to get paid every dollar, as he probably should, really, then I'm probably not here for it, to be honest, just because I think he had a strong enough season that he can probably command a fair contract. I don't think it'll be a long contract as well, but does someone else? I do not want the Lions to overpay for him personally, especially, like I say, I don't think that the 3 to 4, as in 3-man to 4-man front, is going to change things dramatically. But I have no idea what his market is. And really, I don't think anyone really knows that much. I'm sure there'll be estimates that come out, but yeah, it's really hard to predict what he'll get.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm sorry, you go.
If you ask Charles, I think he'd tell you that he's able to play any position in any front. I don't think he would say he fits into either scheme, so we'll bother him. I agree. At his age, I think that is where he will be looking to get every cent he can. Like, by his admission, he's no spring chicken. Like I say, he's been around the league a few years. He's been around the block a few times. Like I say, he's a few years off that first round pick now. So he's looking like he's coming into his prime. I expect him, and I would recommend him if I was agent to go chase every dollar he can. So I don't know if he'll stay in Detroit. I agree. If the price is right, happy for him to stay. If he wants to go get the bag, then I certainly hope he gets it elsewhere.
Just to finish off with the last bit of news I had here before we go into the stuff that's just broken, a couple of bits and pieces, not with the Lions, but around the league. MCDC revealed in a later media session at the NFL Combine that they had hired Cameron Davis as a defensive line assistant. He's bounced around the college ranks as a coach at that sort of level. I think this was announced by the Association of Minority Coaches or some sort of organisation resembling that. So don't know much about him. I don't know if anyone does here know anything about Cameron Davis particularly. Didn't think so. No, okay, so we'll leave that hanging as it is. A couple of bits of around the NFL news just to quickly chat on before we go into the Combine. The first of which is that Jesse Bates, the star Bengals safety, has been tagged. That takes a potential Lions free agent target off the board. And Calvin Ridley, the Atlanta Falcons wide receiver who had mental health issues through the season, decided to take an indefinite leave from the team and from the league, has been suspended for the entire 2022 NFL season for betting on games while he was away from the team, which I guess if you are having mental health issues, the fact that he was doing something that's a bit degenerate, perhaps not all that surprising, but it is infuriating for, I guess, teams who wanted to sign him, because he's clearly a talented guy, for himself, for letting himself down. But for the Falcons too, I mean, their situation goes from bad to worse.
Can't trade him now.
No one's paying
wanted
a
to shop him.
second for him. Yeah, no one's paying a second or a first for him now.
I'm just going to go. I hope this isn't the case, but I'm not sure if we'll ever see him again. Like, this is sometimes a very slippery slope. Like, say, he's had the issues, then to go out and break the rules and still be watching football, but to not take the rules into account for betting, and he knew he'd eventually probably get caught up with him. I think he seriously needs someone to put an arm around him in the off season. He needs to probably speak to someone professional if needs be, but he's not too young. This can still be salvaged. I've seen a lot of people writing him off, which is wrong, but hopefully he can get help with it while this year is off.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know the precedent with it, but the whole season feels like a long time. I'm sure more details will emerge to it, but when you see some of the bans that come out for what I would consider significantly worse things, I'm surprised. It's very rare that someone gets a full season ban, is what I'm saying. You quite often see, obviously, 1 and 2 games, but 6 games is for something really bad. Full season just coming out like this, I think, is interesting. So I wonder if there is more to the story.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Roethlisberger was it 6 games for his settled sexual assault / rape charge, which, he was never convicted, but, whatever. So 6 games for that and 17 games for this sounds mad. Sorry, Anne.
And Matt Patricia got 0 games for the horrific crimes he committed here. I mean, that's just not fair.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's betting on Falcons games and speaking with players where it could affect the result. That would probably be more serious.
I feel like there's got to be something more to it. Like I say, I don't know the precedent. I don't know any of the cases with it, but it feels odd to just come out of nowhere with a full season ban. So, but yeah, I mean, to your point, let's hope he gets the help that he needs for all the off-field stuff as well. And then, yeah, we'll just see what comes to light with this.
So I think that he's going to be a victim of circumstance here. So it may be all or none of the things that we've just said, but with the American market for sports betting opening up significantly, with more and more states allowing sports betting to happen, and the traditional detractors of sports betting say the sport is so easily rigged, not NFL, but just sport in general, and you see it in cricket all the time and snooker and what have you. Like, sport is relatively easy to rig at high levels, and people make huge amounts of money on it, and that is one of the reasons why sports betting might never get legalized fully in the United States. So the NFL is creating all these partnerships with sports betting companies in states that are just opening up for these sort of things, and I think they want to be shown to take a harsh line with anything that could compromise that effort, because it's going to make the league a heck of a lot of money. And they can go to lawmakers and say, players aren't going to do this because they know what's going to happen. If you make one bet on the NFL in the season, you're going to miss a season, and that's how we can ensure that the league is as safe as it can be from rigging. I don't know whether... I don't think there's anything to do with Calvin Ridley apart from he's just done something wrong, but the length of ban just feels like it's not to do with him, if you know what I mean.
Sending a message to the league. They're going to throw the book at him.
Absolutely.
I mean, they do it with players in this country in football. Betting is harshly punished in this country on football as well, and rightly so. Something you can't do.
Indeed. Right, let's move it on to the first proper section of the pod, and it's the NFL Combine. So it all started, I think, on the Monday with players arriving, doing medicals, registering, doing the interviews and press stuff, but it actually kicked off on the field on the Thursday, and the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends on the Thursday. On the Friday, had offensive line and running backs. Saturday, you saw the defensive line and the linebackers. And on Sunday, yesterday, you saw the cornerbacks, safeties, and special teams players hit the field. So if we just take this sequentially and just kind of discuss fairly briefly what was happening. On the Thursday then, as I said, we had quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and the tight ends. Is there anyone from that group of people that really caught your guys' eyes? Because they did well, they didn't do quite so well, they confirmed what you thought about them despite what everyone else did, or just some notable highlights from those position groups?
Tight ends, I feel like I saw Daniel Bellinger tested quite well, the San Diego State tight end. I think this, people have always known, I've not been the highest on this tight end class always. I feel like there's a lot of middling guys there, but I have been impressed the more I've seen some of them. Like say Greg Dulcich. There's a lot of guys out there that impressed really well. Jake Ferguson, I've been high on him, but he had a very average combine, didn't help himself there. So, but I feel like it's growing on me. The class is growing on me as a general. I feel like they've had good workouts there. So, let's say Grant Calcaterra, he passed his medical, everything checked out with his concussion issues and everything, which was a big red flag for someone like him. So, everyone's scared by that area. So, I'm more open to now taking a punt on a tight end and saving that free agent cash.
Yeah, I like this tight end class a lot, to be honest. Daniel Bellinger, I thought really stood out. As you mentioned, not only did he test well, but I thought in drills he looked fantastic. When they show guys working the sled from a run blocking standpoint, he really got the thing moving, and other guys were just kind of treading in treacle as they went. So I thought Bellinger looked really good. Jelani Woods, obviously quite a story. He was hell of an athlete. What was he, 6'7", 250 plus, something like that. Quite linear in that he's clearly, I mean, he's obviously fast. He didn't look that great from a lateral standpoint, but exciting prospect there. Guy who's probably a little bit later. I know we have big Trey McBride fan on the pod as well, but he looked really good. He's just so complete. I think it's interesting he didn't run. I'll be interested to see what he does run, because he's definitely not a super fast guy, but just does lots of things really well. And then finally, Connor Hayward kind of mocked in every Lions mock there's ever been since the Senior Bowl, but I thought he looked really good in drills. So he's not obviously your prototypical tight end, and he's really more an H-back. He just was working out with those guys. And I feel like we may get an alternative view in a minute, but I thought he looked really good in drills. Like the way he caught the ball was fantastic, but you'd expect that from a guy who's played a lot of running back.
Sorry, I missed the setup to this. Are we talking about tight ends?
Combine, we were talking tight ends.
Tight ends, quarterbacks, wide receivers on day one, on Thursday. So we have been focusing on tight ends to start off, yeah.
So I suppose just put in the essay, Bellinger had a good one. The one I really liked to see, though, with this was Maryland's Chigakonkwo. We talked about him on the Big Ten podcast the other week for the college football one, and we highlighted him on there. He's had a really good year, about 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, had issues with a heart problem last year, but he's taken them sort of completely out the picture. He had a wonderful East-West Shrine Bowl week. He balled out here at the Combine. I think he ran a 450 or something like that. It's crazy good for a tight end. You know, he's really sort of put his stock up there now as a later pick at the tight end position. Obviously, my stock is still with Trey McBride. I think I love him there, but there's a few guys later on who I'd quite happily draft at this point. Ryan said, I'm quite happy to give up a pick for one of these guys, but he really stood out for this one. It's good to see as well, like I say, put those health issues behind him, hopefully get himself a good pick in the draft.
For the tight ends, I mean, I wasn't overwhelmed by the guys at the top, to be honest. I thought that Likely and McBride were fine. But, I guess I was kind of hoping for them to distance themselves from the pack, and I'm not sure that they did that versus Dulcich and Weidemeyer had an okay day. Jelani Woods obviously looked fantastic in terms of athleticism, but as Tom said in the drills, it was okay. But some of the guys at the bottom, I think, kind of did have good days. So I think the bunch is kind of tightened in that group, potentially. Not to say that, Likely and McBride had bad days either. I'm not trying to say that, just that they didn't jump off the page compared to everyone else. So I don't know if that's fair.
I think that's fair. And also, I think that works for the Lions because, personally, I don't want to be spending 32 or 34 on a tight end, really. I think there's going to be enough kind of high-quality players there that I'd probably prioritize something else. But I think, to your point, there's going to be a lot of day two guys, and there should be good options at, is it 66 we're picking? 66, 97, both of those, I think there should be options, which means we don't have to force it. Not that I think we would anyway. But I just think we're going to have options the whole way through the draft. Obviously, there's a big wait until the 5th round after that. But yeah, I agree. I don't think anyone stood out as a guy who you're expecting to necessarily go in the first now or mid first, let's say. It just means there's a lot of talented guys who are maybe more tight end twos.
All right, shall we move on to a different position group? Let's have a look at the wide receivers, and we'll finish off with the quarterbacks on this day. So, what did you guys make of the wide receiver class? Anyone stand out? Confirm what you thought? Have a bad day?
Calvin
Christian
Austin.
Watson.
Right.
Christian Watson, he is flying up draft boards. I saw someone mock him to us at 34. People think he's got a cusp of making the outside of the first round, and you can kind of buy the hype. Sometimes these guys don't measure up, but he measured up to his North Dakota measurements, 6'4". He's a bit lean in those early 200s, so the frame definitely needs work, but surprisingly fast, tested well in a straight line. Okay agility, but the hands are nice and soft. So I feel like he looks like the complete picture. And for me, when I picture that Lions wide receiver one, he's kind of who I shut my eyes and see. So if he's there at 34 and we've got 2 defensive players, I think I'm going to take him. I think I'll pull the trigger on him because everything I see that embodies that deep downfield threat. And I think he just confirmed what everyone knew about him. Like I say, FCS stud, and he's got all the tools and everything. He's backed up to work at the next level. Really like the kid.
No, I'd agree with that. We've spoken about him a lot on the college pod. He's just been getting better and better and better, and people were really looking at the combine towards him, and he's slayed all his agility drills there. He's shown us what he is potentially capable of. Obviously, he's a small school guy. The level of opposition is going to be far superior to anything he's come up against before. But in terms of giving himself a chance to be drafted at the highest possible opportunity, he's done that. One I mentioned as well. Oh God, I've forgotten now. Where were Calvin Austin? Obviously, he's the short 5'8" guy out of Memphis. All the concerns over him, obviously, over his height. He's quite small. How does he do when he gets to an NFL field, when he meets the bigger boys there? But he's just been, again, killing every single trial that he's been at, whether it be at the Senior Bowl, where he did really well. I know the Lions were really, really high on him. And then this, obviously, he showed his speed, just how quick he is. He's an absolute buzzsaw for this small guy, but in his agility drills, just did not look out of place one bit. And I think he's going to surprise people by how high he goes up above. And like I say, the height really could have pushed him down and made teams, have big concerns over him. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. I think you're going to see someone pick him really high because it's the separation he gets, the speed he has. It's a potential game changer there, especially as a deep threat. So, he was another one who did really well.
Yeah, and then a couple of guys who I think both were at the Senior Bowl, but maybe a little lower down. So Alec Pierce, I was actually watching Kyle Hamilton versus Cincinnati, and he really popped. As in, Kyle Hamilton, it's hard not to look at him the whole time because he's so good. But Pierce was causing issues for that Notre Dame defense. So the fact he tested as well as he did, I didn't think he was a bad athlete, but I was surprised how good of an athlete he was. I think, especially with that 6'3" frame, that's really positive, especially for a team looking for an X. And then Velus Jones, who I was really impressed with at the Senior Bowl, and he's obviously a speedy guy. The two things that not surprised me, he ran 4.31, and like I say, 4.45 is plenty speedy enough, but 4.31 is you're moving, and he did that at over 200 pounds, which I think was the most surprising thing for me. So he looked almost more like a 190-ish guy. I didn't see his Senior Bowl measurements, so I'm sure he came in over 200 there, but 6 foot 204 to run a 4.31 and show a lot of intricacies as he did at the Senior Bowl. I think he's a really nice kind of late day 2 option. I'd be surprised if he lasts till day 3 now.
I mean, just return extraordinaire. 2,400 yards returning in college. That's what that sort of speed does for you.
Woo.
Just painting it all with a broad brush, it was generally a really good day for the entire class. There was only a handful of guys that you can say really underperformed, but Garrett Wilson ran quicker than Olave, which I don't think people expected. It was always really said perhaps that Wilson's game is a bit more well-rounded and Olave is just the speedster who's just got that little bit of extra. And actually now I've been hearing the exact opposite from people on podcast, which I find kind of strange now, coming at the other side of it, that Olave is the guy, it doesn't matter what scheme you put him into, he's just going to succeed, but Wilson's a slightly faster guy who's potentially a little bit more of a project, despite the fact that he's projected to go half a round higher than Olave, which I find bizarre. But both had good days, confirm what people thought about them. I thought Jahan Dodson had a really good day, confirmed that he's got good hands, he's got good speed, which is really what you wanted to see from him. Obviously, you've mentioned Watson. Sky Moore had a great day, got kind of almost solidly in day 2 now. And, I've heard
take
some
him off round 3.
Yeah.
He's not reaching round 3.
Well, I've seen a few things say that he could potentially threaten day 1 as well, alongside Christian Watson. So, there's a few guys threatening that sort of territory now. I thought that Tolbert kind of arrested some of his fall. He was obviously being mocked as a day 2 guy early on in the process, now firmly into day 3 comp pick territory, but he might rise again. You mentioned Austin. Wandale Robertson had a really good day. Khalil Shakir, I think, had quite a good day. And then further down, you had some people do really well too. Tyquan Thornton is currently 210 on the draft board for the Draft Network out of Baylor. He ran the fastest 40 time of the lot. So I think the entire class really had a good day, bar a couple of guys, one being David Bell, who I think his RAS scores below 3, which is a bit rough, even for someone who, it was always said he was a production guy and not an athleticism guy. You still wanted him to test a bit better than that athletically. And Traylon Burks didn't jump off the page as much as people were hoping. Again, it wasn't he did badly at all. He had a fine day, but he didn't turn it on as much as he could have done. Any dissenting views on any of that particularly?
See, this is where I have a sorry, go on, Ryan.
I was underwhelmed by Burks. I wanted to see faster than 4:55. I think he'll be very disappointed with his 40 time. I know he's a bit heavier, but we've seen some of the heavier guys like Jelani Woods run really fast for his size. I wanted to see a little bit more from the 40 in a straight line. I know he's not penned as a speed merchant, but it was a little underwhelming. But I know his gameplay, so I'm not parking. But some people will criticise him for it. But he looks faster in game than he does in a straight line.
See, this is where I have a problem with what the Combine does about perceptions of players. All I've seen this week, in terms of the receivers as well, is about David Bell. Oh, he's been really bad. He's not done good. But you don't base your assessments of players off the Combine. I mean, it's like Christian Watson's had a really good week and people are saying, oh, he could be a first-round pick. But don't forget, this guy has played at FCS level his entire career. It's the second division of college football. It's not against the greatest opposition in the world. And the strength of opposition goes up exponentially when you come up to the NFL. And yes, you might have the athletic tools and that required, but you've not come up against this level of opposition before. You don't know how they're going to do against it. Whereas David Bell, he's played in the Big Ten his entire career. He comes up against some of the best players in college football and produces. I mean, this year alone, this guy's a first team All Big Ten guy, and this is against some of the best receivers that come up to the NFL, period. He had a 200-yard game against Iowa this year. Iowa produced NFL quality DBs in their sleep. It's one of the best defenses in the entirety of college football. He's put up over 100 yards against Ohio State, who just have nothing but 5-star corners and safeties on their roster. This guy gets production against some of the very best that college football has to offer. And because he's ran a little slow at a combine, all of a sudden his stock's... No, you look at the tape with him. He's played against much better quality opposition. He's going to be a good player at the next level. And this is the trap you've got to avoid falling into. You can't just assume everything off this combine. Watson is not necessarily better than Bell. He might get drafted higher. They've had 2 different paths through college, and they've got 2 vastly different experience levels at the next level. And if Bell gets pushed down because of this, someone's going to get themselves an absolute steal. If they're doing it on the combine, it's just silly.
I think making purely decisions off it is, well, it's very Twitter, right? As in, it's the world that we live in. What I do think is, previously Bell was discussed as potentially like a guy who might be playing at 32 or 34 or something like that. I think it's harder to justify spending a first rounder on someone with a more limited athletic profile. But either way, you don't make that decision based on a stopwatch. It means you have to go back and double check things. So how does he win? Like I say, I haven't gone back and done anything since the combine numbers have come out. But with Burks, for example, like 4.55 for me is fine for a heavier guy. But then how does he actually win? And I haven't seen that much of him. I haven't really done much of a study on the receivers. If he wins with athleticism and running past people, then that might not translate. And that might be something where the system they run at Arkansas allows him to get open and make big plays, but that might not translate at the NFL level. David Bell, he's not quick. But how is he going to be utilized, and what do Purdue do? Is it something where actually he wins by being technically savvy and in different ways than pure athleticism? And that might translate. So with all these things, if numbers don't back up what you thought you saw in the first place, you need to go back and take another look. It's stupid to say someone is a bad football player because they got a bad score on anything involving a stopwatch.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's move on to quarterbacks to round out day one. Obviously, you've got some of the cream of this crop there in Willis, Pickett, Ridder, Howell. How do you think the group did, boys?
I'm still not massively sold on any of them after this. I do really like Sam Howell, but that's more of a value pick. It's all about value. If they fall far enough, then they bring good value. But I don't think any of them raise their stock to levels where I'd be seriously considering them with the first couple of picks, especially at this moment in time. Especially Willis. I know Willis had a good day, but he's still not a number 2 pick in my eyes there. I've become more interested in the group after this, the development groups and the late ones. EJ Perry had a really, really good day, and he's been slaying it again. Shrine Bowl, he balled out. The combine, he's done really well at. Probably going to be around 5 or 6 pick, and someone who has gone completely and utterly unnoticed because he comes out the Ivy League where the quality is not, well, his team was poor, but he was really good. And I think guys like him, Ellaby, Akil Glass, there's a lot of untapped potential to be found in there, which will be more beneficial for us long term than any of these like late first, early second guys. Still didn't see a lot that really convinced me otherwise.
No questions answered. The combine was never going to really help that because they've all got their issues. Everyone had a good laugh at Kenny Pickett's 8.5-inch hands, one of the smallest on record ever. Yeah, at the end of the day, you can laugh at it, but you turn the ball over about 58 times with those hands. But Ridder's got huge hands. He still fumbled like 36 times as well, which is almost identical to Pickett. So I'm not high on any of the quarterbacks. I agree. I get why Willis didn't run the 40 because, well, let's be honest, he don't need to. It just been waste of his time and he did risk hurting himself. So people were bemused by that. But there were some nice throws out there. We know that his athletic ceiling is very high. We don't know how low the floor is of his play. Corral, he's coming off that injury because he should never play in the bowl game. So I wasn't surprised for him to skip doing anything at all, try and make his pro day. He's sinking like a stone for a lot of people. That's not his fault. Because you can't see him out there, it's like out of sight, out of mind. People are slowly forgetting about him, which is, he can still produce that. I still think he'll still get taken fairly well. But every quarterback here is a project. I'd say I don't know who will be a day one starter, if any of them. I don't know if he'll be a starter after a year. So I'm certainly not on the Malik Willis at 2 trade. And it certainly doesn't increase the trade value of 2, even if people think he's there for it. So didn't alleviate any of the issues for me at quarterback. I'm still probably taking a punt in the second on one of the lesser guys. Like say Caleb Ellaby, I do like. Like say he's a nice dual threat guy. Had a good year as well.
I think it's rare for QBs to really increase their stock at the combine. Unless you're going to run a time that no one expects, and a lot of them didn't run, then there's not much to do. I remember Josh Allen hurling balls 80 yards downfield, getting a lot of press, but actually in was it the year before when Deshaun Watson came out? I remember people saying, oh, Deshaun Watson, it doesn't look like he's got a good enough arm because his velocity coming out was at 49 miles an hour and the teams were expecting 55 and all this. So it's normally just knocking players about random things rather than people getting big jumps at the combine. There is no big concerns coming out from the meeting rooms, which is way more important than people throwing in shorts anyway. So yeah, I think everyone's just really stayed where they are. Corral was the guy I wanted to see for obvious reasons. We haven't seen him at the Senior Bowl, but yeah, I don't really think anyone moved.
I feel slightly differently just because it's not a normal quarterback class, and it's not the 2015 class either, as everyone's been saying. It's not that bad, but it's a quarterback class without an established QB1, even though I think most people say it's Pickett. But, I'm not saying... I think that he could be very well unseated, and in fact, he's not the Draft Network's #1 ranked guy anymore. So, there is some debate on that point. So there's no established #1, and also there's an argument to be had as to how many, if any, are going in the first round. Now, I'm sure there will be some going in the first round, but it's not often that you have that conversation. So I think that the combine becomes more important just because being QB1 has value in a bad class. If you get to be the first one taken, that's massive for that person. Also, QB needy teams are going to zero in on you. So I think it took on an increased importance because of the perceived lack of talent in the position. And Willis apparently came through the interviews exceedingly well, obviously threw the deep ball very well, seemed to move quite nicely, but didn't run the 40. Pickett, I thought, threw quite well. And I think with the bigger NFL ball, with the hands, which I think were actually bigger than feared, even though they're still exceptionally small, the fact that he threw well with the bigger ball and interviewed well probably raised his stock very slightly, not massively, but it answered some questions. I think that Ridder probably did himself a few favours by moving well and running a 4.52 and throwing the ball quite well. I mean, it's one of these things where I think the really small differences are going to matter a lot in a class where a lot of the guys are kind of just regarded as they're all as good as each other. I mean, how many times have you seen in mock drafts there'll be a run on quarterbacks when the first one is taken, so it will kind of get down to 20, and then 20, 21, 22, 23 are all quarterbacks because the first one goes and they all go. And it's like the implication is they're all a bit of a muchness, so the little things really matter here to me.
I just think it's a free-for-all now. Pro days aren't really going to matter either. They're not going to prove anything. I think it's just, you pick a name out of a hat, it's as much chance as happening as what's going to happen in the draft at this point in time, I reckon.
Just wait until Malik Willis's pro day and all the content that comes out of it. Happens every year when it comes to QB pro days.
It's tiring. We've been subjected to Malik Willis at 2 now. We've got Jordan Davis at 2. I swear people just want to make us suffer for the sake of it.
I saw one comment saying convert him to safety. I am all aboard that train. Let's get Jordan Davis at safety.
You imagine, good God, you made him in a receiver and he hits you in full flow. You'd end him.
Love it.
I swear there was a guy who was playing defensive line last year who was a converted safety running back, but I can't remember who that was. We definitely profiled him, but I cannot remember for the life of me who it is. Anyway, we'll leave that for another day. Blue and Silver has basically made that point, and I think that's the comment that you mentioned, Jordan Davis to safety, but more seriously, he actually said, I don't know how they pass on him if he falls to them. I presume at 32, but God knows he could be meaning 2. And I replied saying, it doesn't seem like the best use of resources when you've got someone like Ali McNeil who plays the exact same position, who played really well last year. You're making one of those guys redundant because not both of them can be on the field. And his response was, no, play both of them and drop Levi, which I still don't like because it's still making one of you guys redundant. But, maybe he's giving up on Levi, and I don't like that. But maybe Levi isn't going to live up to it. I don't know. So that's some of the thoughts of the fans coming in there. But there we go. Right, shall we move on to day 2? Because we've spent a long time on this already, and we've got the D-line to get through too. So maybe we'll pick up the pace a little bit and have offensive line and running backs on day 2. And if we start with offensive line, what did you guys make of
Kenneth
this
Walker?
What? He were pretty good. Bernard Ryman, he looked pretty athletic. Ran a decent 40, nice agility. He looks like he's someone that's increased his stock. Trevor Penning, like I said, I've been watching a lot of Trevor Penning, like I say, the ball and this, like I said, people love the nastiness, like I say, he's got the strength, he's got the good figure. I think it was a pretty solid, like I say. I didn't watch tons of O-line because for me, it's not a huge need. Like I say, the running backs, I did like some of them. Pierre Strong Jr., he lit up the boards very fast, nice and agile, like I say. So it was great to see him out of South Dakota State. I think he's going to be a riser. People need to start watching some of his games from South Dakota State, start to learn his name because he's going to have his name called. He did himself the world of good.
Yeah, I want to draft him as well, but I think he's put himself in the top 100 conversation now, and that's maybe too rich for a running back in this draft. But if he's there later on, absolutely. Again, I'm not really watching the O-line too much because we don't need too much. The only thing I'm looking at is development tackle. I've looked. Godecker, the other Central Michigan tackle, wasn't there, but I'm going to watch him on his pro day. Abram Lucas did really well. God, he's Washington State, I think he is. He's the tackle there. He had a really good day, and he's the type of guy I'm looking for as backup on that line. So I don't want Will Holden back. Don't think he offers us anything. So if sort of he's there, if Godecker's there, I'm all for taking one of those guys. But Abram Lucas looked fairly good, and I'd be quite happy taking him. As for Penning, I don't know. I don't like him. He gets bullied by too many smaller people. People get under his pads really easy. Don't know why he's drafted so high personally, but that's just me, that one.
There's a lot of talk about the fact he's not getting past Carolina at 6, which I find mind-blowing. But I was more meaning you just don't like him in general. I was like, poor guy.
Oh, no, don't like him. Don't like him as a prospect.
Valid. So out of principle, I didn't watch any of the O-line because Bam Olaseni didn't get an invite to the Combine. But other than that, I actually watched none of Saturday, to be honest. My two takeaways are Kenneth Walker is now Kenny Walker, which I didn't realize was a thing. But he's now being referred to as Kenny Walker everywhere. And also, he's fast as shit. I did not expect him to run that quickly. But again, I haven't watched that much of him. But otherwise, nothing to add.
Zamir White looked good.
If you want to watch someone fun, Tom, watch the edge who wrecked Bam at the Senior Bowl. Was it Deshaun Dixon?
Shrine Bowl. He's West.
Deshaun Dixon, he's an amazing edge. He's from Norfolk State. He's FCS. He rinsed Bam in that. But since then, he's just been getting better and better. He's a really good late edge prospect to watch out for. But they had a fun back and forth, they did.
Nice. I don't believe you. No one beats Bam, but okay.
No, he did beat Bam. There is footage to show it. In fairness, they both beat each other a few times, but that was one of the fun battles to watch. That was.
So Ash is just the fountain of all knowledge and has informed me as to who that guy was that I was trying to remember before. And the reason I knew it happened is because it's one of our own. Aleem McNeil is that guy. So he's the former running back type, safety type defensive lineman as he is now. So there we go. In terms of the interior guys, I think that Dylan Parham had a fantastic pro day. I'm combining. I've seen him predicted on Pro Football Network to go like late 100s, early 200s. And I see now that the Draft Network have him at 62. I think as Raz was above 9, he had a really good day, very strong and nimble, so that's really great. I didn't see too much of the tackles, and I didn't really care too much about them as well. The only thing I did hear is that Falele continues to drop, that he's kind of all size and not convinced he's going to translate particularly well.
That's surprising. He's very quick out the gates for Lele, is he? His size isn't an issue for him. There's not been in anything I've seen.
But, I mean, just the pictures of Evan Neal is the thing that took me aback about the tackle class. I mean, the guy, 6'7", 6'8", 340, and he looks like your typical in-shape, tall wide receiver in terms of body type. It's just absolutely incredible how slim his stomach is. Like, how can you be that size and that weight and look as in shape as he does?
Crazy.
Anyway, yeah, it's absolutely mad. Running backs, as he said, Kenny Walker had a good day.
Devonta Price stood out. He worked out well. Yeah.
He was on our Senior Bowl team as well, Florida international guy. He's very intriguing later on in the draft. Some really good, intriguing late round running backs. If you want another one this year, he's one of them.
James
Abram Smith had a big day and all, didn't he? The Baylor back. He's just been getting better and better. He's put himself into conversation as one of the top running backs now.
And James Cook had a fairly good day too, right?
Yeah, and he's got no mileage on him. He's got no mileage on him from college whatsoever. He's not played as much, so he's fresh as to go in the NFL.
There's a few questions on Hamilton. We will get to him shortly, Blue and Silver. Right, the next day we had was the defensive line and the linebackers on day 3. So defensive line, we're going to talk about them in depth in a little moment. So I'm going to skip over that and talk about linebackers. Who for you guys stood out or didn't, or for the wrong reasons? What do you make of this class?
It's the new crush, isn't it? Damone Clark. He's the one who killed the draft here in case of that. The calls for him are getting very, very loud now. He's always been considered very highly at LSU as one of the top, one of the big leaders on their defense over the years. I was never that high on him myself personally, but he's just put all sort of questions to bed about him. He had an excellent day.
Jojo DeMan, he hurt his stock. We knew because he was a former safety. His height wasn't very good. He was very light, so his RAS score wasn't great on that. Straight line speed was okay, not very well, but his agility scores and his testing was through the roof. We know his coverage skills are brilliant, but I still don't think he'll play as a linebacker at next level. I think someone will try to put him back at safety. He did not help his cause with the size and strength to play that inside linebacker position because he just doesn't seem to have I don't know if he can gain enough weight as well, but he's only like scraping 6 foot, so he's not huge. So he didn't really help his cause, and I think he might have slid a bit at that position. Troy Anderson, though, was fantastic at linebacker. He lit up the board, everything green. 6'4", like 225. I've spoken about it in the Montana State guy. He was good at everything. Straight line speed, he had the cones, decent bench, like I say, everything about that. I would love, if he fell to day 3, I would sprint to the podium.
So there were 10 linebackers who tested a RAS score of 9 or above. There were 3 linebackers who scored 9.99 or above RAS. It's an insanely athletic group, and there should be a lot of choice everywhere here if you want someone who's good athletically. So Brandon Smith was the 10. Leo Chanel, I think it is, Troy Anderson with the 9.99s, but otherwise, the linebackers they've chucked in the outside linebackers too, so Jermaine Johnson features here, but he was 9.87. Chad Muma, I know, gets mentioned a lot with the Lions. He was a 9.78. Damone Clark, 9.75. Quay Walker was there too. Christian Harris was an 8.81. So if you're looking at a group that's particularly deep all the way through at the high, mid, medium, and low ends of this draft, you can get people who are going to fit the athletic profile that this front office seemed to like. It wasn't many guys who athletically tested poorly that we drafted last year, and I don't think that's by coincidence. So I wouldn't be surprised to see at least one of this group draft above the Lions, if not 2.
It's a good year to need linebackers.
I'm with Ryan. I can see a guy like Troy Anderson. I think linebacker's probably 4th, probably on their list of priorities, 4th, 5th. So you're looking at those round 3, round 4 guys, and he's like lead out of all those probably at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's going to be so much talent at 32, 34. I just don't think the opportunity is going to be there unless Nakobe Dean falls or something like that. But only last guy to mention is Devin Lloyd maybe didn't look quite as great as I thought he might. I think he tested pretty well overall, but most of the linebackers that have gone really high, when you think of the Devin Bushes, the Devin Whites, etc., I believe both of those guys ran 4.4s, and maybe even low 4.4s. The fact he's running a 4.66 isn't ideal for a rangy style linebacker like he is. Obviously, his size is great. I just didn't think he looked as good in the limited drills, admittedly, I saw. I only watched some of the highlights afterwards, but I didn't think he looked as good as I maybe expected. So I don't think he helped his case of being a top 10 pick by being there, but I don't think he's hurt it in the same way. I was maybe a little surprised.
I mean, maybe it's just that he's leaving a little bit of something to prove on his pro day more than anything else. It's just putting him a little bit of pressure on himself to do a little bit better.
Yep.
All right, let's move to the final day. Yesterday on Sunday was the DBs and the special teamers, ignoring the special teamers because I don't think that's a need for the Lions, particularly cornerbacks and safeties.
Just quickly, should we talk defensive ends? There's a few which are quite relevant for the Lions.
I mean, if you want to, but are we going to cover them later?
Don't do this.
Oh, okay, fine. Yeah, fine.
Yeah,
Don't do this, Tom.
My bad.
Oh, I love that.
Know exactly what he's going to say.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer. All your questions about Hamilton. I can address them now. Ignore his workout. Ignore the numbers. Don't get put off by him. He didn't have the best day, but we've seen what he can play. So it's fine. Still take him at 2. Trade back if you can. I'm still on the Hamilton train, even though he's 40 and that wasn't great.
Full 100% Michigan propaganda this is, and don't fall for it. Do not fall for it. It's like with Dax Hill. Don't fall for the propaganda.
Do you want to expand?
Luke agrees with me. Luke knows what I'm on about. He's in the chat, so... No. We'll just go on to the corners. We can talk about the edges later.
Okay, so we'll talk about corners first then. So cornerbacks, it was a good day for Sauce, Amar Gardner, who hasn't given up a touchdown in his entire college career, over 1,000 snaps played, and he showed up in drills like he was the guy that everyone was watching, and he did not disappoint. A few false starts in the 40, which gave me a little bit of twitchiness, but I thought he looked fantastic. A few guys who perhaps didn't perform as I'd like. Kyler Gordon was a guy who was, this guy who was meant to be supremely athletic, but very raw, and actually tested not as well as I'd hoped he would. So maybe that's going to see him fall down boards. And then on the other hand, you had Tariq Woolen, who is also very, very raw, but he ran a 4.29, was it? 4.26?
He's the only corner we need to be talking about. He's going to be a guy who's in the Lions range. He's fantastic. He's on the UTSA team, which broke records last year for the program. Really good side. He's an amazing player. And this offseason, he's just done his stock of world of good. So if he's there, round 3, I don't know if he still will be, but if he's there, you take him instantly. He is that good.
I think we're going to be priced out. I just see no way I think someone's going to, especially a cover 3 team, I think is just going to gamble on him and say, we're going to take him high. I think especially after we took Iffy as well, that they are similar style players in this kind of long, raw, hyper athletic. Obviously, Tariq Woolen is hyper athletic, but similar style players. I struggle to believe that we'll go down that route early, and I just don't think he's going to be there in the 3rd round.
Like I say, there was good days for like Trent McDuffie. Like say him and Kyler Gordon, 2 Washington corners. I think Trent separated himself now. I think he's pulled ahead of Kyler by quite a fair bit there. I think you could get him a nice pickup in the 2nd round. He tested fairly well. I think he ran a low 4.4, early 4.5, so the times weren't too bad there. Like say in Washington, always produce good cornerbacks. Like say they've got a good system that translates well to the next level. So he could be someone that could be good value.
I kind of was just underwhelmed by the corners in general beyond some of the guys that we've mentioned. McCreary didn't do anything to arrest his fall for me. You had Kea Elam, I didn't think looked particularly great. Mario Gubrich, I wasn't overly impressed by. Kobe Bryant didn't have a good day. This was a group that I thought kind of fell more than it rose as an entire group. I don't know if you guys... I know it's very broad brushy, but it just didn't feel like anyone really showed up.
I think there's aside from Sauce, who obviously solidified his place towards the top. Obviously, Stingley didn't do anything to help his case because he wasn't taking part, as you'd expect. But I don't think there's many guys who really help themselves that much, especially in that next tier. Like say, McDuffie, and again, we're saying measurements don't matter, and then I'm going to almost say the opposite. But corners who don't have length, it is a challenge. It does limit what they can do, and often they then do get pushed inside. It was the same thing talked about with Roger McCreary at the Senior Bowl. It was a similar thing with Trent McDuffie, and he didn't look that great. So I think there's just more questions coming out of the combine for corners than maybe there was going in.
Mm. Just to highlight someone,
I really worry for Stingley. Like, there's people that are saying that he will skid, and I can see it. I can see him falling outside the top 10.
Well, this was another thing for Hamilton. I know we're going on safeties right now, but so many players ducked out of this week because of injuries and said, "I'm going to go to my pro days instead." Hamilton didn't. He missed the end of the season through injury. He's rehabbing from injury. He went there, did the full battery of tests. He said, "You know what? I'm going to do this." A lot of others chickened out and went to the pro days where it's going to be more comfortable for them to do their testing. He went straight in the deep end and did it. That is an endearment for him. People should be happy that he went there and did all the tests. He could have ducked out. He doesn't need to prove anything here, but he still went and did it.
So there we go. Just to highlight someone from NFL.com who've highlighted their winners and losers, there's two cornerbacks there, but one is especially interesting just because of where he's slated to go. So this is, according to the Draft Network, someone who's 274 on the draft board out of Sam Houston State, Zion McCollum. Yeah. So he ran a 4.33 40 at 299 pounds and jumped 39.5 inches. He ran a 3.94 short shuttle and a 6.48 3-cone. So insanely athletic. Obviously someone who's going to rise. I didn't see him in the drills, I must confess. So I don't know how he looked otherwise. But
they talked about him a lot in the drills. Daniel Jeremiah in particular kept pulling him out when they were doing some of the different drills as a guy. I heard his name 2 or 3 times during, so.
There we go. Right, let's move on to the safety group because that's the one that everyone wants to talk about, especially on this podcast, given what we've said in the past about who we might want at 2. Let's talk about him. Kyle Hamilton out of Notre Dame. His physical measurements checked out. 6'4", 220, I believe.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, so, he was measured at that at Notre Dame, and everyone kind of thought that was slightly inflated because which college doesn't inflate their metrics? And he came in exactly what they said. In fact, I think it was 6'041", so slightly taller than 6'4", which is insane. He did not test athletically, as people might have hoped. Ansel alluded to the fact that he's coming off an injury, and that may arrest some of those doubts. What did you make of Hamilton in the athletics test and in the drills?
He looked an absolute world away from all the others. He just moved so much better than the rest of them did. Just made use of every square inch of ground he was on. He tested incredibly well in the drills. I don't think anyone came close to him personally.
His hips are so fluid for a big guy. Like, of course, he can get a little bit upright because he's so tall, as discussed, but he's so fluid and smooth in his breaks. And like I completely get it, and it's not glamorous because the 4-yard dash is what is the most glamorous thing about the combine. But firstly, it's not the end of the world, especially for a guy at 220. Secondly, it doesn't show up on tape. What does is that burst and explosiveness. And on his athletic testing, that really did show up. His vert and broad were kind of top end elite. And I'm pretty sure he still tested as like a 9+ on the RAS score, didn't he? Or he was there or thereabouts. So, yeah, I mean, maybe you go back and look at a couple of things, but when did athleticism ever, anyone who studied him, when did it ever cross your mind that athleticism was an issue? It just didn't. The only thing which I could potentially go back and nitpick at was when he's in trail technique, he sometimes gets lost in man coverage. Now, maybe that's down to a little bit of a lack of agility, but I mean, come on. It's such a classic combine overreaction, to be honest. That being said, I would have loved to see him go a bit quicker, but I was expecting him to run like 4.50 and he ran 4.59. Just don't think it changes anything.
Yeah, so he ran a 4.32 short shuttle, which is in the 4s of the RAS scoring, 6.9 3-cone, which is good, not great, 4.59 40, 1.6 10 split. But he's in a position that doesn't require you to... It's more important to have elite explosion potentially than it is to be able to run the 40 yards. I know you want the sideline-to-sideline ability, but I think Kyle Hamilton's biggest asset beyond the height, beyond the weight and anything like that is his mental ability to read what's happening and be running in the direction he needs to run before most people have even thought about what they're doing. So you can't really test that. I mean, beyond the Wonderlic, which obviously isn't being done, and how much does that test really in terms of instinct? Like, you can't test for instinct. It doesn't happen. So it's something that you've got to see on tape. But the speed is slightly concerning to me. I'm not going to lie. I'm someone who's on the Hamilton at 2 train, and I still am. But I am looking for him to go to his pro day and do a little bit better. I mean, safety at 2, no matter what, and I know he's a generational prospect and probably the best player in the draft. Even so, even though we all want Hamilton at 2, I don't think there's one of us that wouldn't say that safety at 2 is a slight reach. I think the argument is that anyone at 2 is a reach, and he is perhaps just the best player of all of them. But in order to justify that, it would be nice if he ran faster, right?
So you're going to ignore several years of college footage, snaps, a guy who's at the top of his game right now because he's 0.09 slower in his 40 at a combine? No. He's coming off an injury. He didn't have to do this. But you don't disregard several years of highly elite tape because he runs slightly teeny bit slow in the 40. That's what bad teams do. I don't think you should be expecting any more than that. I think it's wrong to. I just think it's people have been trying to nitpick him for months now just because they don't want to take a safety at 2. He's had an ACL tear. No, he hasn't. He's not a good locker room leader. Yes, he is. It's just another one of these long list of things people are using to try and dissuade themselves from taking him at 2. The tape says otherwise. His athleticism is absolutely fine. His side-to-side coverage is elite. The way he reads the game, his IQ is more than elite. That's all you need to know.
And if you look at other safeties, I mean, Jamal Adams ran mid to high 4.5. Sean Taylor ran a 4.5. Ed Reed ran a 4.5. Tyrann Mathieu ran a 4.5. Like, we're not talking about guys out there running like a 4.75 or something and wanting to play safety. And also, I don't think Hamilton's at his best if you're going to play him as a pure centre fielder. And we don't play that system anyway. So it's just, yeah.
The best defenders have a brain. They have a brain and they have the relative athletic skills to go with that brain to make themselves a top-class player. That's what he has. He has really good athleticism and a hell of a brain to use it with. That's all he needs.
Well, let's expand the conversation out a bit to the rest of this safety class. And Daxton Hill leads the way as safety 2. He tested very well. I'm not sure his drills were the best, potentially, but he was particularly athletic. Brisker had a good day. Seen had a good day. Petra, perhaps not so much. I know he might be a slot corner rather than a safety, but he was not the best tester out there. What did you make of the rest of the guys in this class?
I'm going to disagree there. I thought Petra had a really good day. I've loved him more and more through the process that he's gone. He looked really smooth and slick in his drills. You know, I wasn't even going to watch the safety class because, like Tom, who was protesting that Bam wasn't in there, I was protesting that Reed wasn't at the combine. I wasn't even going to watch the safeties, and it got to the point, but I saw Petra in his drills, and I was like, it's like, I think you don't want to admit that you like something a lot, but I've tried and tried and tried, and I just got to admit I really like Jalen Petra. I really do. And I am very happy with drafting him high if we miss out on Hamilton. I thought he looked really good. I think he showed the fluidity, the movement you want, the ball skills you want from a safety there. And he's just a guy who's on such an upward curve at the minute. He's just been getting better and better and better. And he's going to continue to do so.
He's a gamer. He reminds me actually more of kind of like Elijah Molden last year, who didn't test great, but just a guy you can put in the slot and you know is going to be around the football. Like, he's not perfect, and he started off a little shaky in drills, but I thought in the back half, I actually thought it looked really nice. It's something where Eric Schlitt released an article today, and I hate to disagree with Eric because very well respected, my favorite Lions journalist, but he thought Daxton Hill looked really nice in drills and Jalen Petre didn't look great in drills. I actually thought it was the opposite. I didn't think Daxton Hill looked particularly good. I know he tested nice, but I didn't think he looked great in drills. And I thought Petre, didn't start fantastically, but I don't know, there's just something about him. And like I said, they said on the broadcast, it's such a cliche, the whole kind of, he's a football player thing. He's not going to test great when he goes to his pro day, but I just think he's a good player. I think he's one of those guys which people are going to maybe overthink. And then a few years' time will be like, man, someone got a steal in the 3rd round or something like that. He'll probably go a little higher, but you never know with these guys.
It's that silent Michigan propaganda again. You know, if people no, but I think people generally tend to favour their own, and with the Wolverines, you know, in a few cases, that's expected. I've seen Haskins drafted was at like 66 and higher. It's bias on their part, but I mean, you only have to go back to the Senior Bowl and look at Petra there in coverage. He dominated all week in coverage. The only guy who got any success against him was Trey McBride because he's an absolute freak at tight end, and you don't pair them off on safeties very often. But apart from that, his coverage skills are exemplary. He moves really well. He's everything you want from a safety, and you're probably going to get him for decent value as well. So, again, I'm not reading too much into some of this criticism here. We've seen it on tape in game. He does well.
Couple of comments from the Twitch chat. We have Dan saying that Ant is a Kyle Zealot and I'm a Willis one. I'm glad that Brad and the team are making the decisions. Fair enough. Ash has said that Petra is what Michigan fans think Daxton Hill is. So there we go. Luke has said on the YouTube chat, Daxton Hill is a damn slot cornerback at his best at slot corner rather than safety. I can see that for sure. Couple of others just talking about, as you say, Sean Taylor, Ed Reed, 4.51, 4.55, respectively. Right, that is the combine. I don't know whether you guys are going to go into that a little bit more on the College Football Podcast, but it is generally more in depth on there. So if you want to hear a little bit more about the prospects as we go through this process, you want to check that out. Generally airs live on a Wednesday at about 2:30 Eastern Time, 7:30 UK time. Let's move on and talk about our defensive line project. What do I want to say? Defensive line prospects. That's what I want to say. So we took a group of 10, I think, 10 prospects. There's one that we've taken out because Ant is going to do a live film breakdown of his, and that is George Karlaftis. So we're not going to be talking about him today, but we have got 10 for you. We have Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle from Georgia, DeMarvin Leal, the defensive tackle from Texas A&M, Jordan Davis, the nose tackle extraordinaire from Georgia, Perrion Winfrey, the defensive tackle from Oklahoma, and Travis Jones, the defensive tackle from UConn. Those are your interior guys. And then the 4-3 defensive ends, we have Aiden Hutchinson, defensive end from Michigan, Trayvon Walker from Georgia, Logan Hall from Houston, Cameron Thomas from San Diego State, and Kingsley Anagbear from South Carolina. We're going to kick this off with Tom and Devontae Wyatt, the defensive tackle from Georgia and PFS #1 interior defensive lineman. What have you seen from Devontae Wyatt on tape, Tom?
Interesting. I didn't realize he was #1 ranked because I was going to talk about after all the Jordan love, definitely not that. Jordan Davis love. After the Jordan Davis love, for me, Wyatt is the best interior guy in the draft, to be honest. And he's obviously got really good size. Obviously, he's not 340 pounds, but he's over 300. He's 6'3". He ran a 4.77. Obviously, we're going to come on to talk about some of the edge guys, but Hutchinson was a 4.74, 4.75, I believe. So he is shifting. I mean, I believe Aaron Donald ran a 4.68 at 20 pounds lighter, and this guy's running a 4.77. So we are talking the top end of elite speed at the defensive tackle position. So he's a versatile guy. He's just so explosive out of his stance. I think that's what really comes across. He explodes off the line, makes contact. He's not an overly physical player, but he's a hell of an athlete. He's actually, like I say, we're going to come on to talk about some of the edge guys, but he's almost as bendy as some of the better edge prospects as well. And I think as a pass rusher, there is a lot of potential there. And we started to see that down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. He does show nice hands. He uses a snatch move really effectively. So basically, or push-pull is maybe an easier way to describe it on this, but engaging with guards and then pulling them towards you using their body weight, slingshotting yourself past it. So he does a few things. He's a little underdeveloped, but he's explosive. He's got disruptive potential. He's smart as well. He's got a good nose for the football and he often finds it. So there's lots of good. On the weaknesses side, he is slightly, I'd say, underdeveloped as a pass rusher. And one of the downsides maybe of that Georgia line is it's not like he was the focal point in getting all the snaps there was. but there's clear potential, as we saw down in Mobile. He's just fine as a run defender, which is not uncommon, especially for guys who are more three-techs, which he definitely is. Yes, he can play a little bit of one, but I wouldn't really like him there. He is often blown out by double teams. He's a guy that if we did end up taking him for the Lions, for example, I don't think he's going to improve our run game, especially in the first year. He is probably more of a finesse guy, despite being 300 pounds. So he's not overly physical, despite the fact he's very twitchy. And then just a few things in terms of general measurables. So average length, you'd like him to be a little longer. It's not the end of the world. But he's also a bit of an older guy. So obviously he was at the Senior Bowl. He's going to be 24 at the start of the season. So am I right in thinking Penei Sewell took his first snaps when he was 20 this year or something, which is crazy. But 24 is on the older side, especially if you end up taking him for the Lions, say at 32. You get him on fifth-year option as well. Suddenly you're trying to think about renewing a guy for a long-term contract at 29. So I guess the summary is I'm pretty high on him. I like him a lot. Before we talked about going to the four-man front, I was very much pro him at that 32, 34 slot. I am now. I just don't think the Lions necessarily will be.
Yeah, he's someone who popped off the tape for me. So I'm going to be taking Jordan Davis in a couple of players' times. And Wyatt was always the first guy off the line. That's one thing that really showed up to me in looking at Jordan Davis's tape, is that Wyatt was always ahead of him off the snap. And, you know, it's one of those things that was just really impressive to me. He was the disruptor more often than Davis was. I don't care what the combine has said. I prefer Wyatt wholeheartedly right now. I think that he is someone who is going to cause more havoc. Now, so he's maybe someone you have to game plan for less than Davis because of the physical beast that Davis is. But I think maybe Wyatt can then come a little bit under the radar, and maybe age is the only thing, like you say, that I can really knock him on, is I don't really want to be re-signing him at 29 to a long-term deal. And I don't like drafting seniors high without a really good reason. And it's a good defensive tackle class. So I think that's the only thing that's really hurting Wyatt for me, is the general state of affairs. What about the rest of you guys? Do you see much on Wyatt?
Any guy coming out that front seven from Georgia this year is a baller. Seriously, they all are. They just dominated in a historically good fashion this year. You know, he's just one part of the cog, but, you know, I think most of these guys are pro ready. They're going to have really good careers. And like you say, the age is an issue. And for us, I don't know whether it's in a position. I think we can put ourselves in a much better position with guys who we can draft at his position rather with the age thing and, you know, the value of the pick you're spending on him. But no denying, he's a hell of a good player. Really is. And some team is going to be very happy with him.
Can't say any more than that. I agree. I don't think the age will put us off him, but it will some sides, like say. It might make him fall. Just some will see him falling just out the first because they don't want to commit the 5 years to him. But he's great. He's a behemoth, as mentioned, like I say, can swallow up on the inside.
All right, let's go to the second player, which is DeMarvin Leal, defensive tackle from A&M. Ryan, what did you see from him?
Yep, DeMarvin Leal, defensive tackle, Texas A&M Aggies from 2019 to 2021. He's just come off one of his best seasons, 58 tackles, 2 passes defended, 8.5 sacks and a forced fumble. Very productive year. RAS score coming out this year. It's not great average at 7.75. 6'3" and a 7th inch. 283 pounds, which is where I'll come on to the weaknesses. He ran an almost flat 5-second 40, which isn't too bad. His worst drill would probably be the vertical. He only managed 27.4 inches, which is bad. Like I say, for someone of his stature and the frame, all the weaknesses which I started with is the base. Everything, he's too lean at the bottom. He struggles to help in run support because he's someone that is easy to grab hold of. And once you do, you're able to manipulate him at the line of scrimmage. So he's not able to shed blocks very well. He's not able to sink himself, anchor, and get that base down. So he does struggle interior run support. He's been asked to do a lot of things over the years. He's been moved all over. 3-4 front, he'll play interior. He'll go wide 9, he'll play outside. He's able to generate, if he's able to get the fast first step, which he can get pressure from the interior, he's able to get to the quarterback. But I prefer him more a bit on the outside. Like I say, he's got that slender frame that does need to put a bit of weight on. So there is the able and the bend and flexibility to get outside. He needs to get drafted by the right team. Like I say, it's got to be someone that will put him in one position and stop asking him to do everything. I've seen draft people call him jack of all trades, master of none. And that's how I feel right now about watching his game. So I'm not quite sure what front he fits in. All I know is he definitely needs to bulk up. Like I say, he needs to put more on that. It's a shorter frame, so he needs to get a bit stockier if he's going to be able to work in run support. But he's shown that he's able to get to the quarterback. He's got decent finishing skills and a bit of explosiveness around the outside. I'm not too high on him for Detroit. I don't think he fits what we need this year. So, but I think as a long-term starter, he had about a 6.7 projected grade. So he's that kind of backup that could be a starter in future. So he's one of those middling guys, could be a round 2, round 3 guy, but there's certainly something there to work with his experience.
What about the rest of you guys?
There's not much I can add for me. He's probably one of the defensive guys I've just not really had time to look at as much because he's always been sort of consistently at the top of the draft and not really in a position where we can draft him. But again, I sort of agree with Ryan's analysis there. There's not much I can add.
Yeah, I haven't seen loads of him. When I remember watching some of his stuff earlier in the season because he was projected as a potential guy to go to the Lions in the top 5 or the top 10 or something like that. And I was just confused, to be honest, just because I didn't see anything particularly special. So I wondered what I was missing. And I wondered then, is it because he's going to test like an absolute freak when he gets to combine and it's all untapped potential? And then he didn't. So, he's a guy which seems to be in free fall. And like I say, it looks more like a day 2 guy when initially he was talked about as a top 10 guy. So there's clearly talent there. I just personally haven't seen anything to justify the original hype. So, and I haven't really gone back and studied him since.
Yeah, I have nothing to add on Liao. Actually, that's exactly where I'm at. So I will move on to the next one, which is Jordan Davis, nose tackle from Georgia, who's mine. So number 99, he's 22 years old, just turned 22 in January, actually. So a young 22-year-old, 6'6", 340. Played 41 games in 4 years, getting 90 tackles, 37 of which solo, 11.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, a pass defended, 1 rushing touchdown in the season just gone as well. He used as a running back for 2 rushes this year, not in the rest of his career though. He has an RAS score of 10. It's the second highest RAS score in history. So he's someone who is a rare athletic talent. Also won the Chuck Bednarik Award for 2021. That's for the best defensive player in college football. And also won the Outland Trophy. That's for the best interior defensive lineman. So the guy comes with some pedigree. And I watched a couple of games of his against Alabama and Clemson from this past year. He seems to line up between the nose and the 3 tech. He's got a really lovely swim move. It seems to be his go-to thing, actually, to swim past defenders. He does a good pull and shed move here and there's, one of his things. He's got great instincts on run defense. You cannot not double team this guy. He's just too big, too physical, especially in run defense. But if you leave him one-on-one, he's going to become a problem in rushing as well. Pass rush, beg your pardon. His power is exceptional. So in the majority of his reps, he's resetting the line of scrimmage a couple of yards back from where it is originally. So everything you've heard about him with that regard is true. It happens. But there's a couple of concerns that I've seen as well with him. The first is that his first step too often is too slow. And I said it when I talked about Wyatt, but the snap is made, and too often he will be a half a second before he's reacted to the snap occurring. And it's really concerning for me because, you know what? You can run a laser time 40 all you want. You can have that 10-yard split. But if your thinking time is half a second, you're way behind where you need to be. And this is from the most recent season. It's not something that I saw in his tape early on. So that's a concern to me. He needs to increase his reaction time. when he doesn't win his reps, he could get into passing lanes on pass downs, and he doesn't get there. He could get his hands up and prevent a pass from getting off, but it's not really something that he's thinking about right now. Now, hopefully, that's just an easy thing to correct in his technique, but it's not something that I've seen from him. He finishes sacks well, though. That is one thing I've seen, is when he does penetrate, his hunger to get to the quarterback and finish is really, really good. His lateral movement's great too. So there's some really, really high positives, but I think there's some negatives that people aren't talking about right now, especially with the hype from the combine. What about Jordan Davis for you guys? He's been talked about at 2 and 32 and everywhere in between. What do you make of him as a prospect?
Damn good one. Like you said, his RAS score is second only to Megatron's. He's the only guy who's ever tested better. But this guy is, again, having watched so much of Georgia this year for that defense, maybe slow on some plays, but he can just blow up offensive lines. And he is really powerful. He is really strong. And once he gets going, you just can't stop him. And for me, I don't want to see him in the NFC North next year. I would be quite happy to not be facing off against him, because he could potentially be that damn good. For us at 2, absolutely not. Don't want to even go anywhere near him at that point. If he's there at 32, 34, maybe, but the player himself is really good. He's been part of an historically good defense at Georgia. He's tested athletically well. Someone's going to take a punt on him high, and they're going to get a damn good nose tackle out of it. So, great player, but not for us.
I agree. I've seen people saying 2 everywhere, anywhere between second and like 27. People seem to be mocking him. So I feel like I don't want to break my golden rule. Like I say, I don't fall in love with people that blow up at the combine, because you set yourself up to be stung. But I've watched the tape. I've seen a lot of Georgia this year. Like I say, he's one of those players that can turn it on at the flick of a switch. He's able to wreck through a line. Like I say, he's a great finisher. He wraps up really well. He brings down, he locks the hands and fingers, so he takes good angles, doesn't overshoot, so he's able to work in pursuit as well. So he's someone that could be a real asset to a defensive line at the next level, and I expect to hear his name called fairly early. Just not 2. Let's not call his name.
There's one other thing that I really didn't mention that I should have done, which was important for this. He played less than half of the snaps this season, and quite often later on in games was blowing hard, like really hard. His production for me, like he took snaps off. Like I saw one rep in the which game was it? I think it was the Clemson game, but I'm not. No, it was the Alabama game, and he just kind of stands up after the snap, can see he's being double teamed, and almost just doesn't bother engaging. And it's not a quick pass off, and it actually ends in a touchdown for Bama in the right hand corner of the end zone as the offense is looking at it. And I just kind of watched that and thought, the hell is that? Like, if the guy's only playing half the snaps and has to take some off, I don't like it at all. The guy is supremely athletic, but his stamina needs some work.
And I think it's a red flag. It's part. One of my concerns with it is, does it need work? He's in one of the top kind of programs in the country, surrounded by lots of highly talented strength and conditioning staff. Or is it the fact that when you're 340, 350, 360 pounds and you are this athletic, that uses a lot of your own natural resources to keep that running? I mean, you look at the difference between a boxer and an MMA fighter in terms of who carries more muscle and weight, and then who tires quicker, right? I worry that at his weight, he is not going to be able to play 70, 80% of snaps. And that's probably okay, but is he going to be able to play 60% of snaps? Is he going to be able to play 50% of snaps? So there's that side of things. And then the other part is, obviously, Aaron Donald is incredible in just so many ways. One of the ways he's incredible is because he's small, and that he uses leverage incredibly well, but it also means when he shoots gaps, he's smaller. If you look at the perfect profile for a running back, Derrick Henry is obviously a beast and things like that, but the perfect profile isn't to be 6'3" and big. It's to be 5'9", 5'10", and low to the ground for a number of reasons. I wonder having not done lots of work on Jordan Davis, where the fact he has this level of athleticism and yet hasn't flashed as a pass rusher really, even when he's been on the field, is part of it to do with when you're that big, like you can't just squeeze through gaps, can you? So it's a harder route to the quarterback in a number of ways. And so, like, if he's there at 32, 34, I'm absolutely not ruling him out, because obviously there's a lot to work with there. But yeah, some of the hype over the past, the hype for the athletic testing, completely deserved. It was wild to watch. I loved it. I was trying to explain it to my girlfriend, and she was like, I don't understand what any of this means. Just like, this guy's running so fast and he's so, she didn't care. But like, that side of things was excellent. The whole like hype of he should go top 10, top 5, top 2. I'm so out on it. But I think someone will get a good player. I just don't think it works for us, as Anne said.
No, that's fair enough. Right, let's move it on to Perion Winfrey, defensive tackle from Oklahoma. Anne, what did you see from him?
Yeah, so I specifically picked this guy, I think, based more on his Senior Bowl performances. And then I've gone back and done a lot of work on him. But yeah, to say Perion Winfrey, defensive tackle with the Oklahoma Sooners for 2 years. 2 years ago, he was the #1 rated recruit coming out of JUCO, which is the junior college system. That's where the guys who can't get into the FBS or FCS go. And, if they perform well, they do get their opportunity in the big leagues. He got picked up by Oklahoma. He's been a starter there for 2 years now. 6'3", 303 pounds. So big guy. 10.25-inch hands, 35.5-inch arms. Positionally, he's a 3-tech guy who potentially sort of 3-tech 4-eye, so he's playing on the outside of the guard / inside of the tackle. That is where he projects best at. His 2021 season had a good year, 23 tackles, 11 tackles for loss for a total of 44 yards, 5.5 sacks for 29 yards of total loss. He had a forced fumble, which he got against Oklahoma State in their rivalry game. That actually went for a safety in the end. He swatted it into the end zone. They got a safety out of it. It's got a couple of quarterback hits on there as well. So, I mean, before the Senior Bowl, like a lot of guys, a lot of people hadn't heard of him really as much. That was myself included. And why was that? And one of the big things that comes off the tape with him and his sort of his journey through college. And you'll remember this one, Matt, when we did our breakdown on Levi last year from Washington. He's been played out of position there. This guy is crazy athletically good for a defensive tackle. But one of the big problems in college, especially if you're a defensive tackle and you're athletically gifted, they tend to stick you at the nose tackle, because obviously you're dealing with the double teams. It's one of the most physically demanding positions there. And even if you're not necessarily that sort of guy, they'll put you there anyhow. So the production, it doesn't sound like the most in the world. And this is the reason why he's not been put in a position to succeed. The fact that he's mentioned himself, he's not been getting played in his best position there. Adding to the fact that the Sooners defense was really poor last year. They nearly lost to Tulane, gave up a big lead there. They nearly lost to Kansas State. Wasn't the best year for them. And also with the emergence of Jordan Davis, a lot of other defensive tackles have been forgotten about. But as I said, why are you now hearing about him? Since the college season ended, since he got to the Senior Bowls, he's come to the Combine, he's been working in his more natural position at 3-tech. And I mean, if you remember back to the Senior Bowl, if you did much research on that, he dominated that week. He had an absolute hell of a week there. His one-on-ones, he destroyed Zion Johnson in training there. And Zion, as you know, he's a huge fan favorite of mine for the offensive guard position, ranked as high as the top of the second round here. He absolutely had his way with him there. And then in the game himself, he racked up 5 tackles. He had 3 tackles for a loss. He had 2 sacks. He got MVP honors in that game there as well. He's done really well in the Combine as well. He ran a 4.8940. That's 80th percentile amongst defensive tackles. And his arm span, as I mentioned earlier, that's 98th percentile in his position. And with arms, of course, that's a big thing. The longer your arms, the easier you can strike your opponent before he strikes you, the more leverage you can get on him. So, those are sort of the things that have been coming to the fore. But, I mean, what sort of a player is he? He's a gap penetrator. He's not a guy who's going to go up against double teams. He will go for that gap between the guard and the tackle, and he'll blow up plays in the back of the field. That is what he's really good at. And how does he do it? It's his first step. This guy has probably the best first step of any of the tackles here in this draft. Gives him an explosive get off, allows him to overwhelm the offensive lineman. And you mix that with his ability of pass rush moves, he's got a really good swim move. His rip move is violent. It can unseat a lineman. He can get past him into the backfield really quickly. And it just makes him incredibly difficult to block when you put him in a more favorable situation. Now, in terms of deficiencies, like I said, on his college tape, you'll see he can't deal with double teams well, sometimes has trouble getting through the center there, but that is a schematic thing, like with Levi. And when you see him play in his more natural position, you just get a guy who, as I say, is violent, he's aggressive, he's great off the line, and he gives you a sense of versatility as well. It's like with Levi, because he's played the nose, he does know how to play there. So you can really play him anywhere from nose tackle to 5-tech, and he'll be able to produce something there for you. And of course, coaches value versatility more than anything. He's projected in a 4-3 defense at 3-tech. You put him as a 5-tech against the run. So, this guy, he's on a hot run of form at the minute. Probably one of the better guys out there. He's probably projected towards the top of the second round at the minute. For us, I don't know. I mean, the value is probably a little too rich for me at 32 and 34, and defensive tackle is down on my list of needs here. But if we were to trade back from 32, maybe pick up an extra second round pick, I think he would be in play for me there. But I really like this guy. He's just an absolute mismatch when it comes to that 3-tech role, and he destroys opposition running games. That is his job, and that is something we need. So, yeah, I really like this guy.
What about the rest of you guys?
I love that you mentioned Levi, because after he flashed at the Senior Bowl, I went back and did some very brief work on him, and Levi was the guy that kind of screamed out to me, as much for the kind of weaknesses as the strengths, because there's that kind of disruptive penetrator that Levi was as well, but there was definitely inconsistencies in how he played, especially against the run. And the Senior Bowl, he was hot the whole week, and he had that fire, and it was an interview for him, and he delivered. Obviously, we don't have any access to off the field stuff. I'd love to know what he's been like in meeting rooms and things, and what he's been like in interviews, because it always concerns me when a guy looks incredible for an entire Senior Bowl week, and then you go back to tape and you just see a lot of inconsistency. And people have done more work on him than I have said similar things. I don't know if you saw that as well. Like I say, I'm definitely not an expert on him, but it's a little bit of a flag for me.
I think for me, as I say, that Sooners defense was not good last year. It gave up a lot of points, and it was the problem with Levi. Me and Matt did the tape. He's just not a nose tackle. Levi struggled massively as a nose tackle. You get one good play and 10 out of him. It's not his fault. It's just not how he's designed to play. The second you whack him at 3-tech, when you whack him out there in the one gap situation, he's a lot better. And like I say, it screams the same sort of player to me he does for this one. So, it's do you want another Levi on the team, really? You're going to take the chance, obviously. Injury history is not there. He's been fit all the way through it, and he's ascending. Like I say, he's come out of JUCO straight into the starting lineup for the Sooners. It's a big upgrade, and he's slotted right in there, but who knows?
Yeah. All right. Shall we move on to Travis Jones? Sorry, there was someone else I forgot there. So last the interior guys, Travis Jones, defensive tackle, UConn, and that is you as well.
Oh, damn. I thought we were doing snake with these. Right. So, yeah, Travis Jones, the defensive tackle from the UConn Huskies. Like I say, I changed him out. This is a guy who I've become really impressed by recently. And this is another one who's really shone post the college season. And I've said this a lot of times, don't go off, tape from the combine, Senior Bowl to do your evaluation of a player. But I make an exception for him, because when you're coming, and Ryan can attest to this, from such a bad college football team, UConn are top 2 in the country for worst team. Honestly, there's very little talent on there. They lost to Holy Cross from the FCS this year. They've had a rotten year, but amongst all that rubbish in that side, there's a gem in there, and you've seen in the postseason. So he's been there 4 years. He's 6'5", he's 333 pounds. He is a big boy, but he doesn't move like one. He moves extremely damn quick. So he's more of your prototypical nose tackle, 1-tech guy. I think there's a potential for him to move out as far as 2 and 3 as well, given the way he was moving at the combine. But his 2021 season was decent in the circumstances. Had 47 total tackles. He had 7.5 for a loss for 42 yards a loss. He had 4.5 sacks for 34 yards a loss. He had a further 7 quarterback hits, and their schedule was not the easiest. So that's some good sort of production there. I mean, you know how I like my stories about guys overcoming adversity. Quinn Miners last year, you know, how he managed to come up from Wisconsin Whitewater, how he did all his training, lost his gut, etc. When Travis Jones went to UConn, he was 360 pounds and he had 30% body fat. He was a really, really big guy, but not in the way he is now. Since then, he's dropped an entire 30 pounds. He's only 13% of his body fat there. He's trained incredibly hard to get in shape. But not only that, he's trained incredibly hard and become a leader on his team. He shows, you know, great leadership skills. And like I said, there's not a great deal of talent there, but still, he's come to the fore and his leadership skills are undeniable on there. Now, his calling card is his run defense. He's probably one of the better run defenders when it comes to defensive tackle in this, if not the best one. You know, he's a stout run defender. He resets the line of scrimmage. He eats blocks and space. It's very difficult to move him. And he keeps the second level very clear when it comes to the run game. So what he means by that is, you know, the pocket doesn't collapse on their side. The linebackers, the safeties, the corners, if a running back breaks through the line of scrimmage, they've got a clear shot at them. There's not these guys coming up to make the second level blocks because he doesn't let them through. He's very rarely caught out of position. He's very good at diagnosing the run game. And like I say, getting himself in position, not getting moved. But that doesn't mean he can't pass rush either. Like I say, he's very highly athletic. If you go back and watch his combine footage during the drills, he moves quick for a defensive tackle. You'd think he was a linebacker the way he was moving. And at 333 pounds as well, it's something. And I'm really, really starting to like this guy. He can collapse a pocket when he wants to. He's very athletically gifted, as I say. So he can get after the quarterback when he wants to. And if you go back to the Senior Bowl footage, he can get after the quarterback. Again, he was another guy who had a good Senior Bowl week and showed his pass rush ability more so than he did his run game, which we know he's already good at. And simply the reason he's not been talked about more, like I say, he's a victim of playing on a really bad team. And I think whoever's going to draft him, their run defense is going to get better immediately. This guy is that good when it comes to against the run. And I tweeted this out not long before we started on the show. If we get to pick 66 and he's still there, because I'm not using DT on top of the top 3 tackles, I am starting to get very comfortable with the idea of drafting him, having him and Aleem stuffing the run up the middle to start off games, bringing Levi in for obvious pass rush situations. I think there's a potential for Travis Jones to have a future with the Lions at the right value. I think that's just how good he's been. So, yeah, I love this guy, and he's certainly going to be on my draft board. One pick 66 appears if he's still there.
Any thoughts on Travis Jones, boys?
I've seen him play a bit this year, and like I say, he obviously the victim of being on a poor team. From what I've known and what I've seen of him, he's done an incredibly good job of managing his weight. That was the first thing that he struggled when he got to UConn. Like I say, he came in really heavy. He had to learn how to use his body. He's learned how to bring down the weight while keeping the body fat to a minimum. At the next level, great run stuffer. I think he'll play at a more natural weight. He'll be able to put a bit of that on. Like I say, still keep the body fat down. I think he'll be great in the 4-man front. Like I say, keep him with Aleem McNeil. For teams that want to run the ball heavy, we'll be able to set that interior really nicely between them. Able to force them. He'll make guys bounce back outside, make them think twice about trying to come through the middle. That's where his strongest asset is. And he's got the ability to learn to pass rush as well. So for the basics of the game, he's got everything down. He's sound across the board there, and you can work on expanding everything else there. So I agree. You get him in the second, third round, he could make a really good run stuffer on a defense.
And he can push the pocket as well. But I agree. I mean, the Lions didn't defend the run well last year, to be honest. I would almost rather invest, not necessarily a premium pick, but to help shore that up. Because especially when you're playing 2 safeties, you kind of got to earn the right to play 2 high safeties, because you're taking a man out of the box to do that, and you've got to show you can defend the run. Otherwise, you have to keep bringing that second safety down the whole time to try and stack the box. So the more we can almost fill up the interior with guys who can really defend the run. Obviously, hopefully we're going to have some help on the outside at end as well, or potentially we will. I love Travis Jones. I think he's great. I think he's got, and especially with that athletic potential, you think of guys like kind of Kenny Clark, Daron Payne, Javon Hargrave, guys who are, they play a lot of the one tech, but they're not just traditional nose tackles who are going to sit there, and they do have positional versatility. They can play the 3, even the 5 at push. I see him much more in that mold, even though his body is maybe more traditionally nose tackle.
All right, there we go. Those are your interior defensive linemen. And we go now to the 4-3 ends. And we start off with the guy oft mocked to the Detroit Lions. And Tom's going to profile Aiden Hutchinson of Michigan.
Indeed, I've been drinking out of this glass, which I don't know if you can see because I've got a blur on. I'm going to try and take it off, but I'm actually drinking from a glass which has Hutchinson written on it and kind of looks a bit like it. It's actually a rugby player called Rory Hutchinson, which was like a freebie cut. But do you see that? That looks a little bit Hutch.
Yeah. I see it.
But anyway, you may have heard of him, Aiden Hutchinson. 6'7", 260 out of Michigan. Obviously, very much talked about as a number 1 or number 2 overall pick. PFF grade of 94.5 last year. RAS score of 9.85, which is odd because I heard lots of people on Twitter say he's a terrible athlete because he ran a 4.75 or 4.74, whatever it was, which is frankly hilarious. He's obviously got good size for the position. I think the thing which comes across most of them is how complete he is. In a draft almost full of question marks across the board, he's just a very solid player. And I don't mean that by doing him a disservice, but he's obviously good against the pass. He's good against the run. He's a competitive dude who plays with a lot of violence, which I love. Everything you hear from him is that he wants to be great, which I like a lot. People who clearly have that drive. And like I was reading an article this morning, I think it was a Peter King piece around, he messaged Mel Kiper when he was 19 being like, I'm going to be your number 1 defensive end. So it's some of that kind of slight chip on the shoulder, some of that desire side, which I love. And obviously he's a fantastic athlete. So in the group Discord I was talking about, I was a little underwhelmed at first because, he was meant to be this complete freak. And then actually you put the whole workout together and it's just fantastic. And the agility scores really, really topped it off. So incredible athlete. It comes through on his tape. I was watching the game against Penn State. The second snap of the game, the tackle sets outside and tries to cut block him. He just completely whiffs because his lateral agility to shift inside and duck him is so quick. He actually misses a sack on that play. He gets his hands on the quarterback and lets it go. But you see that agility come through. The 2 biggest things I noticed from a game film standpoint is, first of all, that jolt. So his arm length will come onto, and obviously it's a bit of a concern. But when he makes impact with the offensive line, normally the tackles, he really does jolt them back. A guy who's 260 and tall, obviously. So, and not that he's lean, but it's surprising how quickly he can turn that speed to power. And then the second part, which is why he gets past the short arm length, is the use of his hands. So not just in terms of pass rush moves, which obviously has a lot of, and his counters are great, et cetera, but also controlling tackles in the run and controlling their hands against the pass as well. So not just relying on purely swipes and things, but his hand game is really, really advanced for where he is, and that means he can get away with those slightly shorter arms as well. So great motor as well, gains ground off the snap. Quite often you'd see him, or more regularly than not, you'd see him ahead of Ajabo and even Kwity Paye last year, obviously 2 great athletes in themselves, and very, very good on inside moves and slants as well. So lots of good weaknesses. There isn't really much glaring. He's not the bendiest guy by any means. You think kind of freak guys like Chase Young or Myles Garrett, he just doesn't have that bend in him. He can look a little bit stiff, especially when he's in space. Short arm length is a concern, but it's just by no means a deal breaker in my mind anyway. Obviously, there's lots more Jared Allen comps than there were a week ago because he had short arms as well, but it's not a huge risk for me. He's a little slow locating the ball at times, so he's good against the run, but sometimes he can get so almost excited by the guy in front of him that he sometimes loses the ball. So he's so determined to beat the man in front of him that he's not actually controlling and working out where he sheds that block and where he goes, gets the ball. So he's sometimes a little late with that. Obviously, we're now moving to 4-man front. In a 3-man front, he would have stood up a lot more. I'm not convinced about him dropping back into coverage regularly. I just don't think that's good use of what he's good at. This is maybe overly harsh. I'm not sure he has upside to be a consistent all-pro. I think he's more kind of a Pro Bowl guy. That's not to mean he won't become an all-pro in the same way. Look at someone like a Max Crosby who went in the 4th round and things like this. These things happen, but from a pure like top elite upside, he maybe doesn't have it, but he's a very solid player. I have a really irrational take just to end things off because it's one I haven't heard yet, and kind of everyone knows everything about Aiden Hutchinson already. So JJ Watt, incredible player on the field. His off the field, and not obviously he did lots of good stuff off the field, but his off the field demeanor actually really like it annoyed me. It was so like calculated, and everything was it was almost, they say the same about Russell Wilson. It's all about the brand and it's all about being perfect. I get slight JJ Watt calculated everything he does off the field in his interviews kind of thing vibes with Aiden Hutchinson. It's completely unfair. Just let me have it. That's basically it.
What about the rest of you guys?
Yeah, well, you know me. I've been long on Hamilton at number 2's train here, but for me, it's about taking the best player available at the time. And Kyle Hamilton is a game changer at safety. I don't care what anyone says. He's going to be a game changer because he has the all-round game to do so. With Hutchinson, when I'm picking at 2, I want a game changer. I want a JJ Watt. I want someone who's going to be in that ilk because that's what you're paying for in this draft. And, you know, when it came specifically as well to the Georgia game last year when they were playing in the semifinals, he got completely and utterly nullified, be it double teams, extra man coming out there. His presence was very much affected on the field and he didn't have an effect on the game. You know, Georgia ran out quite comfortably in that one to win it. And when I'm drafting a guy at 2, I want a guy who's going to be a difference maker here. Now, you think about our defensive line this year. You know, we've got Aleem in there, we've got Levi in there, we've got Brockers in there, but they're not going to be taking up a ton of coverage. Aleem might, but, you know, Aiden being the outstanding guy that he is or will be, you know, because he's the number 2 pick in the draft. Romeo might not be fit. Harris might not come back. You've got Julian Aquara on there. People are going to put extra men on Aiden. They're going to be the guys focusing on, can he beat those double teams? Can he come in and affect the game the way I want him to for a number 2 pick? And I'm just not sure. And, you know, I want a guy who's going to be an all-pro there. If Kyle Hamilton has to be an all-pro and a Hall of Famer to be considered to be drafted at number 2, I'm going to hold every single edge player to the same standard. I want an all-pro who is really going to affect the game the way he should. So, you know, I'm not sure. He's a great player, no doubt about it, but is he going to get to the level I want for a number 2 pick? I don't know. And that Georgia game concerns me. If we come out week 1 against the Bears or something, they're putting 2 guys on him. Do I trust him to come and change the game in our favor and win it for us? No, I don't. So maybe harsh for a guy on his first start, but like I say, I'm holding to a standard here. If Hamilton's going to get this standard, I want every single player who could get drafted there to that standard as well.
Ryan?
It's one of the things when we do take him, I won't be surprised. I also won't be upset. Like I say, I know there's all the Michigan bias. Like I say, he's a very well-rounded player. Good pass rusher, solid against the rush. Like I say, he's very technically gifted. Like I say, he's not the freak athlete. He's not the fastest in a straight line, but he does what he does well. Will he be able to do what he does now at the next level against when, like I say, if they bring a jumbo set in, if they bring in like a massive tight end to try and double team him? I'm not too sure. I feel like things have gone his way very well in Michigan. I feel like he's had his way with sides, but when it comes up against those elite tackles, those extra heavy sets, will he be able to be effective? Will he be able to be nullified? I'm not sure. Like I say, I feel like someone will be able to have his number, but we need to bring in a spark to the pass rush. So if it is him at 2, then I'll totally get behind it. Like I say, it's what I've seen on tape. Great player. Like I say, great engine as well. Doesn't need to take many players off. It's going to be the step up in competition for me and doing it on a consistent basis and seeing if he can beat double teams, because he will draw much more attention at next level.
I mean, I think it's unfair to tie him with the brush of he's going to attract double teams and can he beat that, because that's what he's going to face, because the rest of the guys out there are not attracting that attention. Because if we don't take him, we roll in with a half-fit acquirer or a returning Harris alongside Julian or something on the other side because we cut Flowers. Well, that means that they have 4 guys they can take one-on-one and just have a spare offensive lineman to just go wherever they want to. Like, the alternative is really bad. So I'm not sure that I buy that argument. But in general, I already said I'm a Hamilton at 2 fan. So with that in mind, in Aiden, I do see someone who can be that guy. I do see his upside being that high. I do think he can be the game wrecker that we are perhaps doubting he can be. Will he be is a massive question. And, is it likely? Well, no, but I would probably say that about 90% of people taken in the top 3. I don't think that being a top 3 pick translates a huge amount of the time to being an elite all-pro player. And I know you've had the conversation with people where they've said Hamilton has to be an all-pro player to justify a pick at 2. I'll go on record and say that those people are morons. Sorry. But, at the end of the day, I really don't want to be having this argument a month down the line saying we have to get an all-pro player at 2. That's the standard they all have to meet. And it's like, no, it isn't the standard they all have to meet. At the end of the day, they have to be a really good player. If we get a really good player, Pro Bowl, just short of Pro Bowl, but really good, at the end of the day, Lions players get overlooked for these awards all the time. So expecting to get an all-pro player at 2 is just on hiding to nothing anyway. It's not happening. But beyond anti-Detroit bias in the league, which obviously happens because it's not a glamorous team that hasn't had much success recently, the expectations are too high. So I'm not looking for that. That said, I do think that Aiden has a reasonable shot at being that guy. I kind of agree with Tom in terms of that I do think he is a bit more calculated than genuine. But I think the best thing for Aiden Hutchinson's brand is to be an elite player. And so I think he will go out of his way to do the necessary work to build that brand. So, do I think it comes from the absolute best place it could? I mean, maybe not. Do I think that he's going to do what's necessary to be, at least give him the best shot to be that guy that we hope he's going to be? Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. Elite athlete, fantastic agility, good twitch. I think the bend's going to get better. I think his technique's going to develop. And I think he's one of the guys, from what I've heard from other people in terms of the interviews he's done and what coaches say about him, he learns quickly. He takes things on board fast. So I expect the world from this guy, and I still want Hamilton at 2. But if we take Hutchinson at 2, I'm going to be really, really happy as well.
I agree. Right. Whoever we pick is a Detroit Lions, so we'll all get behind them. I don't think that's in question. Oh, I don't know.
All right.
It won't be a top 5 pick in the last 5 or 6 drafts. That's the trouble here. I don't know.
Yeah.
You've got to be really special if you're going to pass up on a generational talent like Hamilton.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that for sure. Right, we'll move on to the next prospect, one who's really, really exciting, rising up boards after the combine, but was rising before that, actually. Trayvon Walker, the defensive end from Georgia. Ryan, what did you see from him?
Yep, Trayvon Walker, defensive end from 2019 to 2021. It's weird because the production doesn't match what you see. Like I say, he only had 37 tackles, 2 passes defended, and 6 sacks this year. Like I say, he was on a stacked defensive line. RAS score, 9.99. That makes him the 3rd best defensive end since 1987. So he tested off the charts. He's an absolute freak physically. 6'5", 272 pounds. Like I say, maybe needs to bulk up a little, but ran a 4.51.40 faster than a lot of defensive backs and receivers. 10.1 broad jumps. He's got the explosiveness and lower. He's 3-cone, 689, so reasonably good agility. So he tested very well across the board. Like I say, for this young man that is very upright, but a bit slender and a bit lean in the lower half, he moves incredibly well. Like I say, hands, they're one of his biggest pluses, strengths, nearly 11 inches. He's got very good grip. Like I say, he controls the upper body of offensive linemen really well. The speed in a straight line doesn't really generate or see through when he's engaged. Sometimes the feet move a bit slowly, a bit sluggish, but his upper body's doing all the work. That's something he needs to work on. But fantastic run support. He sets the edge really well. He funnels stuff back inside because he's got a huge reach. He's able to get out in front of guys without getting caught for holding, funnel stuff back in, kind of collapse that pocket, force everything back inside, which is one of his biggest traits and was one of the strengths of the defensive line this year. See, the pass rush production has been limited throughout the career, but it's there. Like I say, I just don't think he's been asked to do it all that often as a designated pass rusher. I believe he's got the speed, he's got the hands, like I say, he's got the grip. It's just working on the technique from the outside, but he's someone that could be a good pass rusher on the outside. He will play up and down the defensive line. You can put him in positions, and like I say, shooting up draft boards, the ridiculous combine has worked in his favour. I've seen someone mock him at 2. It scares me a little bit, like I say, how well he worked out, but then I look at the production and the film and it doesn't always translate. So I'm a bit and ahhing about him, but you can't deny that he's an incredible athlete and he's got a very high IQ. It's just working it all together. The body and everything, like you say, he's a bit upright as well. So I'd like him to work on getting a bit lower and working on the bottom half of his body.
What about the rest of you guys?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go on, Tom.
No, I was just going to, I said before the combine that the combine should be where you don't get a new crush, you don't fall in love. It's where you get down on one knee and you propose because you've done all the hard work, the tape in the background, and then the combine just confirms things. And then there's idiots like me who just fall wildly in love with Trayvon Walker during the workout, specifically actually the drills. When he was doing the circle drill, where they basically, it's a pass rush, they'll try and bend and things. The flexibility on a guy who's 270 and moves like that is just, he genuinely looked. We talked about Hutchinson not having necessarily lots of bend and not being one of these really freaky guys. Like Trayvon Walker looked like one of these super freaky guys. And I know that obviously the testing backs that up as well, but it's one thing to test well from a linear standpoint. It's another to have the kind of bend and movement that someone like a Myles Garrett had. So, yeah, I'm a fool. I've fallen wildly in love with him. I wouldn't be upset if we took him at 2, even though I know that's not what we should be doing, because he's exciting and there's loads of potential in there.
So did you propose to Bam somewhere else then this weekend just gone?
Well, I couldn't because I wanted to propose, but he wasn't in Indy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Did you propose somewhere else instead? Did you have to move the venue?
No, I used that. I've still got that ring, and I plan on running out to Georgia and speaking to Trayvon. So, yeah.
So I've been having some fun with the relative athletic scores of Trayvon Walker because of such a freaky athlete he is. So RAS.football, I'm looking at Trayvon Walker. They now have the feature where you can run players at different positions to see how they test. He is above a 9 at every position apart from cornerback, where he's just above an 8. But he is 10s at certain position, 9.99 at defensive end. But as a linebacker, which obviously, he could drop into coverage potentially every now and again. And I've just pressed free safety, and free safety is at 9.04. But at linebacker, which he could do somewhat often, he's a 9.96. The guy... His testing scores means that he potentially could translate if he actually gets coached in the right way. He has the profile to do this.
Didn't you have a hot take about him before the combine, Tom? I know you fell in love with him there, but did you say he'd be well up the board at 5 or something after the combine?
So I knew he was going to test well, not that well like that. It was crazy. But yeah, my hot take was after the combine, I think we'd start to see him at number 2 in mocks, and I think it's already happened. So, but yeah, I mean, part of that was I wasn't expecting him to test that outrageously good. I thought he'd test really well, and we all get this kind of, what's the word? We've all seen enough mock drafts that actually you don't just want to see just Hutchinson at 2 for forever, and the media don't want to put out the same mock again. So to freshen it up, I thought we'd see him in there anyway. Now I probably think he's got a more legitimate chance of going in those first few picks. But yeah, it played out.
Yeah, so someone to keep in mind at 2, perhaps. Or maybe if we manage to trade down to 5, that would be a bit more realistic for him. I don't know, maybe he'd be gone by then, considering his performance, but we shall see. We move on next to Logan Hall, the defensive end from Houston, who is one of mine. Logan Hall, defensive tackle / defensive end for Houston, number 92, is a senior. He actually did his junior year twice because of COVID, so I'm listing him as a senior. He's been listed as junior or senior, depending on which program you look at for Pro Football Network or what have you. So don't be confused if you're looking. I don't actually know how old he is because I couldn't find it online, but I imagine if he's in his senior year, he's 23, 24. Height 6'6", weight 275. He's played 34 games, 97 tackles, 50 of which solo, 19.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, a pass defended, and 8 forced fumble. This is a guy who has made massive strides in his career from his 2019 season all the way through to his 2021 season. So the only all-22 tape I've managed to see of him is from the 2020 season, and I kind of honed in on his game against BYU in 2020, so going up against the number 2 overall quarterback from last year. And in this game, and actually generally speaking, he seems to align predominantly at 3 tech, and very early on, he was getting manhandled, seeing no success even one-on-one early. He did grow into the game a little bit, though. He has really nice second effort when he doesn't win initially. He's got a good spin move as a kind of counter, but he tends to ball rush as his default move. That's all that he really kind of has in his arsenal, at least then. So, that was kind of concerning to see. He seems to make contact quite upright, and that stalls him on contact. His pad level is not the best. I know that might trigger some Lions fans to hear pad level's a thing, but there we go. When he does get there first, his first step is really fast, and he can generate pressure from the interior with it. On the highlight reels now, so moving away from that BYU tape and what I could find of him elsewhere, it looks like his 2021 tape is much, much better. It's actually backed up by the draftniks that are out there too, but the guy doesn't take a snap off. He's got a really high motor. His effort through every rep is 100%. He may not win every time on the first effort, but he's going for a second, a third, and a fourth one. His favourite move is a swim move after a jab. He has good balance and power in his punch. He did play a bit more on the edge in 2021, which suited his skill set a bit more. So I actually project him as a little bit more of a 5 or 7 tech rather than a 3, which is what he predominantly played through the majority of his career at Houston. He struggles against double teams. So this is someone who you hope isn't going to attract that attention. I don't think you want him to be your edge 1. But if he's your edge 2, you're going to be in a pretty good place, I think. Have you guys seen much of this guy? Have you seen much of Logan Hall?
This is the one who's fallen through the cracks for me. I can't add too much there. There's that many defensive edges and tackles in this one. I can't add a lot more here.
I've seen a bit of him, like you say, and for anyone that is gets upset about pad level is very much a thing that you need to work about. Like you say, if you come up and you start too highly and you lose that chest battle of leverage and you let them get their hands underneath, they can control you. It doesn't matter how small they are, how heavy they are. Pad level is certainly a thing that can concern some people if you're not able to sink yourself low enough, or if you explode too quickly and show your hand too quickly. So people should really take any notice of that. But I've seen a few of their games, especially this year. Like I say, he looked pretty good. I agree. I'd kick him out from 3 to 5 to, I won't go as far as 9, but I feel like he could play at 7 spot like you say, where he's able to work more on the edge and come crashing down or work inside. He does like that swim move, which does work predominantly better on the outside. He gives that stiff jab, like I say, hopefully they bite, and then tries to work underneath, goes under their arm, or if he's not able to get around them. So solid pass rush technique there, yeah.
All right, we'll move it on to the last two guys here, starting off with Cameron Thomas, defensive end from San Diego State. Ryan, he's one of yours. What did you see from him?
Oh, this guy really excites me. If we don't take Aiden Hutchinson, like this guy is kind of like a carbon copy. He's been at San Diego State from 19 to 2021. This year, 71 tackles, 11 and a half sacks, and a forced fumble. He's at 6'4", 267 pounds. Now, due to a hamstring injury that occurred at the Senior Bowl, he only did the bench, but he did get 24 reps, which is a very respectable number. I believe that's third amongst defensive ends. Prospective NFL grade of 6.19, which puts him on the cusp of working his way into a start and role. Like I say, there's a lot to say about this guy. I believe he led the FBS in total quarterback pressures all year, 72 alone. He's like Snowpiercer the train. He's got an eternal engine. It just never stops off. He does not take downs off, and he gets after the pass rusher every single play. He was the leading defensive player of the year in the Mountain West Conference. He had 20 and a half tackles for loss as well. So he had a monster year, like I say, and he has got a great edge rush. That is where you want him at 7 and 9. Don't even bother with him, like I say, asking him to play against the run. He's going to be more of a TJ Water, a kind of Bosa brother, where he just wants to get after. He wants to cause mayhem in the backfield, and he does it really well. He's got a great first step, which helps him to beat people on the outside, which takes away from the lack of real strength. He doesn't want to take on double teams. He doesn't want to bull rush guys. He wants to work on technique. He wants to go around the outside. He wants to swim. Like I said, the good bench press also tells you he's got great hands as well. He's able to manipulate his way around the outside. He's able to rip, pull, punch, swim. Anything he can do that gives him leverage to go around the outside. And he's an excellent finisher. I've seen this guy going in rounds 3 and 4. I think he could be a projected starter on some teams. I think he could get great value there as a designated pass rusher. And if you play a forefront, I would love to leave him on the outside all game, put someone on the other side of him, let him just do his thing on the outside. I think he can be very successful at the next level. Like I say, put a little bit of weight on. I think he's going to be someone that could get a steal. If he falls to the third round or that compensatory pick, I'll definitely take a punt on him.
Yeah, I agree about just about everything there. I love Cameron Thomas. He's right up on my top of my edge list who I want out of this draft, especially if we don't go with 1 or 2 next best guys after. But, this guy plays in the Mountain West, and these guys create rough, gruff, tough sons of guns out of there. These guys, they like to fight. They like to play hard. They like to play aggressive. Like Ryan says, he's got a good rip movement. He's good punching the ball out if he gets to running backs. He's just the rough, tough style that Detroit wants. And, I could envisage a scenario where, God, if he drops down into 66, then you run that paper up there. Even if you've already taken an edge, I think you go edge again and you take him. I do genuinely like him that much. There are little bits to work on, and the run defense is a little bit there, but in terms of pass rusher, he is really good at what he does, and you can teach him otherwise. But at least to start with, you can bring him in as a situational pass rushing guy. A little bit more depth in there as well. But God, man, I am excited about this guy. I think me and Ryan did a feature on edges, and that's where he first came to my attention, and I've loved him ever since that. So yeah, keep your eye out on this one. Really is going to be something special, I reckon.
I have nothing more to add on him, so we'll move on to our final guy, which is Kingsley Enagbare, the defensive end from South Carolina, and one of yours. What do you see from Kingsley?
So from Kingsley Enagbare, defensive end from the South Carolina Gamecocks. He's been there 4 years. He's 6'4", 265 pounds. His career, 72 solo tackles, 48 assisted, 24 tackles for loss, 15 sacks, 4 passes defended, 3 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. First 2 years, sort of a bit part rotational player there, but his 2020 season is where he really broke out. He got first and second team all SEC honors. SEC is the toughest league in the FBS. You've got some real competition in there. So to get those plaudits is, a feather in his cap for sure. And he was also that year ranked second in the SEC in sacks and forced fumbles per game. He really had a damn good year. It finished slightly abruptly with a hamstring issue that he had, which he had to have work done during last spring. But he's played all through this season. That seems to be a thing in the past for him now. So he is primarily a pass rusher at this moment in time, a bit like Cameron Thomas. So he's got this blend of burst, speed, and power that allow him to, they allow him to apply constant pressure on a quarterback. He's got several different ways in which he can win. His pass rush repertoire is pretty decent for a player there. He carries a great first step again, and it's his ability to disengage off blocks, which is really quite good. He's able to get off them quick and get after the quarterback. Like I say, he is a project guy, but he has the foundation of traits and he has the history of improvement that you want if you're a team drafting a player. Like I say, he only became starter last year after a couple of rotational years. He's really solidified himself in that team very quickly. He had a really good game against Georgia this year. Georgia, one of the best teams in the FBS by some margin, and he showed out well against them, which shows even against the highest level of competition which he's come up against, he's still been able to get production there. Run game is a massive work in progress, and this is the problem with him. Now he's roughly sort of top second round at the minute, and at the minute you are drafting him for his pass rush prowess, but the running game needs work. The processing skills are slow. His ability to diagnose the plays and find the ball carrier is not ideal for what you want in a player right away. And there are some hand usage issues he still does need to work out as well. Just needs to get to the quarterback just a shade a little bit quicker than he has. But like I say, he's been coming up against really big opposition. So it's something he can potentially work out. He's a guy who's going to start off. You're going to start him as a rotational edge in pass rushing situations whilst you develop his run game. But, by year 2, year 3, you'll be able to make a good high-level starter out of him if you train him right. So it's more finding the scheme for this guy. Again, he works in a 4-3 defense. That's what South Carolina do primarily. Going to have him on the edge. Going to be a rotational guy. So for the Lions, I do really like him, but with the sort of guys you've got around who have got a bit more of a complete game at the minute and maybe the same ceiling, the value might not be there. But if he's one who starts to slide and we trade back, whatever, we get a little bit later pick, then all of a sudden it becomes a very tantalizing prospect. Like I say, I do really like the player, but the run game's trouble, and we need guys who are good against the run game. So remains to be seen there. But overall, I like him. People got to realize South Carolina, well, up until this year anyhow, are a little fish in a very big pond there. So it's not the easiest to be able to perform on that team. You're up against some real high-level opposition, so don't worry about the production as much. But he's battle-hardened, be ready to go in the pass game. So we'll see with him. But I do like him.
What do you make of him, Ryan?
I'm really impressed. Like you say, he holds his own in the best conference in football. Excellent pass rusher. He's able to go up against some of the biggest, boldest, brightest defensive tackles. I've seen him look guys silly on the outside. Like you say, they try just grab thin air. He's already gone by them, or they think they've got hold of him. He rips, he swims, he drops the shoulder. He's able to breeze past guys, and he's able to then get into the opposing backfield. I agree, it's the wrong game. I've seen teams use counters, reverses, traps. He sometimes gets a bit confused. He looks a bit lost in traffic because he doesn't diagnose the play, or he thinks he knows what's going to happen and he'll bite on it. And like I say, he's not able to readjust or loses the ball carrier. So he's someone that needs that kind of work at the next level. I'd say it's probably discipline with him. Like I say, diagnosing things, not losing the ball carrier, getting a bit too carried away with what's in front of him. But there's certainly an elite raw pass rusher there. Like I say, the rest of it, if he can learn it, if he does start to slide, if he goes to like round 3, end of the second, if you trade back an extra pick, you could get someone really good value at the next level. In the early days, like I say, if you can just get after the quarterback, he'll maybe be able to repay that. But eventually, you'll probably take him off right now on 3rd, 4th down. You might get someone there that could play every down in the future. So there's certainly a lot there to work with.
I got nothing to add on him, so if you guys have nothing more on Kingsley, then we will round that off there. We do have one question that's just come up, but I just wanted to say, first of all, we have. I just want to have a point of clarification there. If you're worried that your guy has not been listed yet, what I've done here in terms of choosing this class is we took the interior guys and the pure 4-3-Ds. If you can play 4-3 or 3-4, or you're a 3-4 guy only, you'll be featured in a couple of weeks' time when we have a look at 3-4-Ds, outside linebackers, and inside linebackers. So if you're worried your guy hasn't been talked about, we are going to get to him. Just going to be a little bit of patience required to get there. We have Dan asking in the Twitch chat, which position groups would you guys address with our third round picks at Royal Lions UK? For myself, it's difficult to say because obviously it's heavily affected by who you are taking above that. But just looking at the predicted board from the Draft Network, who is who we sub to, I actually have soured on them a little bit, but having a look at who's available perhaps at the back end of the second, so if they fall, who would I be tempted by? Chad Moomer is at 56. If he slips a bit, I'd love to see him, although he's obviously now being mocked a bit more highly than that. Damone Clark, Sky Moore, if they decide, if they fall, that would be really interesting. Dylan Parham, we mentioned him as the guard who did really well in athletic testing. I think he'd be an interesting backup and successor at the right guard position. Tight ends, the tops of the tight ends are in this sort of area. I think linebackers are the ones where it's really, really rich. You've got in this range Beavers, Chanel, you've got Tyndall, a couple of Quay Walker in this sort of range. So that's who I'd be looking at as to where there's a lot of value at this sort of area. How about you guys? In general terms, who's looking good in the third round for you guys?
Again, it depends who's there. If you're asking what priority is there, then for me, that's defensive tackle, linebacker territory. Because obviously I want to go wide receiver, safety, and edge first. So I'd be looking at linebackers. I'd be looking at defensive tackles. Like I say, Travis Jones is there. I run the paper up for him. Linebackers, I mean, I guess, I don't know if Ryan agreeing with me, but if Troy Anderson is there, I would maybe be considering it at this point in time, given how well he's doing. But yeah, it's sort of DT and linebackers where I'm looking at with that third pick. Not discounting who's on the board because it's theoretical. I'm just going on my list of positioning value. That's where I will be looking if we've addressed wide receiver, edge, and safety by then.
See, I'm looking at the safety room. I think in the third round, I'm probably going to double dip. Like, say, if someone like a Smoke Monday, maybe someone like that at the compensation pick, like I might take a punt on someone like him. Agree with wide receivers. Like, say, if someone like Romeo Doubs, if he slips, like, say, if he moves a bit in the further back. So someone like, say, an option like that, or a Jalen Tolbert, someone I could really take a punt on. But for me, I agree, it's linebacker. Say Leo Chanel, got Moomer, got Anderson. Like, say, I don't know. I don't know where you take Diego for go. If he's going to be the compensatory pick, if you want a strong linebacker, potentially play your Mike, someone like him. So there's certainly options there, like you say, that position.
There's so many ways you can go. I mean, it's perfectly viable. And there's loads of mocks that show us going edge at 2, quarterback at 32, wide receiver at 34, and suddenly you're going to be in the third round with no safety. And at 64 is Lewis Seen, the safety from Georgia. So if we can grab him at 66, I think that would be great.
Not a chance he drops that far. He's fully in the first round conversation now. There is absolutely zero chance he gets down that far. I would say that now.
All I would say is that I've heard, apart from the 32 guys who are already mocked in the first round, that there are at least another 30 first round prospects out there who are all rising right now. They can't all rise. Like, I feel like there's got to be some guys who are doing really well, who are vaunted to rise, who aren't going to. So
you've got to take the positions into value and how that falls. Once Hamilton's gone, once Brisker's gone, you're starting to look a little short on safety talent then. And, there'll be a run on them. I think, what was it? Moreg and all and co, we had a big run on safeties in the 40s last year. So when the first one started to go, I should know because my favorite one got taken right fucking before we picked.
You're not bitter about it though.
No, not at all. But there was a big run on safeties after the top guys went. I think it started at about 34 and then they were quickly gone. And I think that's going to be the same with the safeties this year. Especially once Brisker has gone, Hamilton's going to be long gone by then. I think you're going to see a similar run. I don't think you're going to see him there at all. I mean, I think Cameron
Cross,
Thomas.
I like Nick Cross, the Maryland safety.
And you can get him round 5 probably as well. Imagine, do we have a 5th round pick? I don't think we do we?
No, we have. I thought we did. We do have a 5th round pick.
We have a comp, don't we? We have a comp 5th. So you could probably get him there, although he's done himself a world of good as well. So I don't know.
I think there's value trading down from 32 or 34 to pick up a late third, a fourth, a fifth somewhere, just to be in that range, because there's a lot of good value picks in that 4th, 5th round range we might miss out on.
Or if someone wants 32 for the 5th year deal, if you can pick up another second, and then you can start going after guys like Perry and Winfrey as an extra guy, that would be actually quite ideal, really. Because, I mean, it doesn't really matter. We're at 34 anyhow, so we're not liable to miss out on anyone we want there. And if you get an extra second in, go for it.
So Joey Two Times says there's Pierce, Calvin Austin, and Wandale Robinson, who are all going to be in that range and have been linked to the Lions by receiver. Also mentions Justin Ross. But
Mihai Sanders is in that range as well, and I know they've been very big on Mihai Sanders as well, the Cincinnati edge. I've seen there's been a lot of chat with him and with Wandale Rob. See, that thing with Wandale Robinson makes me think that they are going to go big on a wide receiver in the draft. Because if you do go big on free agency, because if you do go big on a free agency wide receiver, then I think your need in the draft probably goes down to round 3 or 4, which is where Wandale is going to be. So I think there might be a grain of truth to this if they are really seriously considering him, because he got coached by the Rams' new offensive coordinator, who also knows Brad Holmes very well. Those two apparently have a very close relationship. So apparently he's been really sort of picking his brains about him.
All right, we're taking one more question and then we'll wrap this up because we've been going a long time. And if you are still with us, then thank you very much. Biggerez70 says, do we think the top 3 is set in terms of who the Lions are looking at? Is it only Tibbs, Hutch and Hamilton that the Lions could pick, or do we think there's a wide receiver or another position who could come into play at 2 if we stay at 2?
Ooh. I think sorry, go on, Rye.
I think if they really, really, really like Malik Willis, they won't wait for him. I think they'll just take him. If they are convinced that he can start at the end of the year or he has the future, they will not wait to see if he falls to 32 or trade up. I think they'll just go and get him. So I think he's probably the outsider.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with the guy that Ant was about to say as well.
I think they do possibly have their top 3 set. I don't know if they're. I don't know if they're convinced whether it's 1, 2, or 3. I think they know the top 3. I don't think they know the order, because I think it's a decision you've got to really think hard about. I mean, free agency's coming, so if we go and sign Marcus Williams, you can rule Hamilton out. Whereas if we re-sign Harris, you can maybe start to question the edges, so you don't know. But I think the trade down's still the biggest thing. I think they'll be doing anything and everything they can to trade down, because that's the ideal scenario for us, to trade down, get another pick. If you can get in that 5 or 6 range as well, still walk away with Kyle Hamilton, an extra pick, then bonus for you. So I think that is still the thing. I think they'll be shopping it dead hard. But if they can't, I think the 3's there. I just don't think they know what order it is.
I think there's a potential disaster lurking with trading down. I really do. I want us to trade down because I'm always in favour of it. But if the trade down is something like trade down to, I don't know, 4 with the Jets, or to, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something, and you pick up a second round pick for your trouble. That sounds like a good trade-off to me. And yet I can see all the guys we want go before the traded pick, and then you're kind of left in no man's land with a load of offensive tackles at the top of the consensus board, and you're like, do I really have to take a wide receiver now with this pick? So to the point of this, we've got an article just come out from our new writer, John. You want to check that out on ROTLUK.com about why the Lions will and should want to stay at 2, which is an interesting piece, so go and check that out. What do you guys think about trading down? Do you really think it's worth that risk? Because I don't know how many guys you want in the 6 to 15 range.
See, if I'm trading down, I think your strategy changes to depending where you're at. 'Cause if you go to 7 or 8, for example, then George Karlaftis is in play. And you know my views on him. I think he's the best edge rusher in this draft. I think you stumble upon gold there. I mean, if you want to address receiver early, you can go Garrett Wilson. Wide receiver is a gaping hole that we need to fill. I mean, you could even go Devin Lloyd. I know he's not done well at the combine, but he's a do-it-all linebacker. And, you know, we really need an inside linebacker who's going to stamp his authority on a game. So I think, you know, you fill in a hole as long as you've got a plan in place and people to go after. But I think even if you're going to 7 or 8, I think the caliber of talent is there to make it worth it, especially when you're coming up to the top of the second. You know, if you want to get a quarterback, you can do that a little more safely now because you've got another pickup there to be able to do so. You've got a deep edge class, so you can maybe go edge earlier at 32, or you can maybe package them up and jump up a little bit for someone. You have options. So I don't think it's a risk to go down, providing you've got your hit list there. And I think there's more than enough good players in the first to justify it.
Fair. All right, yeah.
I just want to stay inside the top 5. I would ideally like to stay in that range because I kind of know who I want. My worst case scenario is we trade to 6 or 7 and we take offensive tackle. That would just really frustrate me. We may get a great tackle. We may get a future replacement for Ty and make our line elite, but it's just not the biggest need. I don't want to pigeonhole and put us in that position, and I don't want to reach for a wide receiver either. Let's say so. That would be my worst case scenario, unless we get an extra first round pick. But for me, I just don't see who's worth even trading up for 2. I just don't know who is that desperate they'll come and get 2.
See, for me in this situation, I've said this, if Jags go tackle, Texans need a tackle now, they're shopping Tunsil. So if you are a tackle needy team, and there are lots of tackle needy teams, the Jets, the Giants, even the Panthers, although they've not got the draft capital to move up, not this year anyhow, you could panic because you've got Ekwonu. And I mean, Ekwonu has really stood out during combine. He's elevated his stock to the point where people are saying he could go first. And then you've got a gap down to Charles Cross. And now I know Charles Cross is up there, but he's never been talked about in the same sphere as Icky and Neal. So if you're sat there at 2 and teams know that the Texans are going to take a guy at 3, I think they'll panic, possibly. And if you're going to trade up for 2, you would rather trade up for an offensive tackle rather than an edge a la positional value, which I know I don't believe in, but I'm flipping the argument round here. Teams will trade up for an offensive tackle because it is a position of great value, especially if you think your franchise left tackle's there.
Yeah. Any further comments, boys, on anything we've talked about today?
No, I think we've spoken enough.
Yeah, it's been a long one, so thank you for staying with us. If you have, just a bit of housekeeping to finish up with. Next episode, this time next week, March 14th, is a deep dive into the secondary prospects. So cornerback and safety, you will not want to miss that. We already talked about the Royal Lions College Football Podcast, going to come back shortly and dive even more into the prospects we've been talking about today and throughout the run-up to the draft. We are going to be looking at the positions of need for the Lions and profiling them one by one each week until the draft hits on the 28th of April. So if you want to have a look at what we've got lined up in the next few weeks, I'm just going to load up my diary now. So we've got Cornerbacks and safeties next week is going to be followed by inside and outside linebackers, and tweener 3-4-4-3 guys are going to be in there too. Followed up by wide receivers on the 28th of March, quarterbacks on the 4th of April, and then we're going to do a full first round mock draft on the 11th of April and a full Lions mock draft over 7 rounds on the 18th before the final show, before the draft on the 25th. Just be a little mini update before we are live throughout the NFL draft. I will be on location in America. I'll be in Vegas on day 4 of the NFL draft, which isn't a thing I know, but I will be there. So I think I will be on Santa Monica Beach, on Santa Monica Pier, as the Lions' number 2 overall pick is announced, and I'm going to hope to come on live with these boys while I do it and get the reaction from the States as to number 1, number 2 overall. So that's going to be really, really fun. But don't forget to check us out next week for the secondary review. Otherwise, we've got our socials just to go through: Raw the Lions UK, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or some variant of ROTL.or_UK. A Facebook group for worldwide fans, not affiliated, but we love being a part of it, is Detroit Lions Fans UK, One Pride Worldwide. I mentioned the website before, ROTLLionsUK.com. Couple of new writers writing some really good things about Hamilton, about why we need to stay at 2, about Brad Holmes and his performance so far, and more articles are going to come out all the way through this draft process. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do by going to our Twitter. DMs are open. We've got our email address on our YouTube channel. Please don't forget to rate and review us. That would mean a lot to us. And if you can throw a free Prime subscription to us on Twitch our way, it won't cost you a penny, but will bump us up. That'd be much appreciated. But just remains for me to thank my co-hosts, to Ryan, to Ant, to Tom, who had to just leave 20 minutes ago because it's getting a bit late for him, especially with the amount of work he has on at the moment. I don't blame him. Thank you, boys. We'll see you next week on the Royal Lions Football Podcast. Let's go, Lions. One Pride.
One Pride.
Pride.